Chapter
Moldy heads were
509.
only seen
Request.
twice, and they were
Timothy.
easily dealt with.
They're still in the
After
restaurant.
walking for an unknown
Erdie
length
Branch
of time,
subconsciously
they
replied.
finally saw the dock and
He
the
then
white
pointed
agate
to the
which had
area where the
candlelight
moldy
seeping
head had
out.
been purified
This
and
sight
anxiously
made
asked,
Erdie and the others
"What was
regain
that
their
just now?"
strength.
They
Maintaining
transitioned
German
from a
sparrow's
brisk walk
persona
to a jog.
Klein didn't
All the
answer
way
until
until
they
they
reached the
Janet's
bottom of the
before
gangway.
walking directly past
Klein
Donna's
stood
family
guard
to
below
the
them with his
tightly closed
blood-stained
door of the
cane
Green
until
Lemon
everyone was
restaurant.
on board. Blazing
Then with a
Danitz
tug,
held his lantern
he jumped
and was
and
arrived
relieved
on the
having
deck with
finally
just a few
completed a
steps.
goal. At
He
that
straightened
moment,
his back,
Ellen had
looked
already
at
begun
Erdie
to
and the
gather his
others,
first
and
mate,
scoffed.
second mate,
"You don't have to
bosun,
worry about what
gunner
that
commander,
was.
and other
Just
subordinates.
know that it's a monster
He
that
got
will
them
harm
to gather
you.
the sailors, if
Adjust
Gammon
the
Sparrow
cannons,
wasn't only a
and
few
prepare
meters
to
away.
depart at any moment."
He even wanted to
Although
proclaim,
leaving the port at night
"Only
had
I,
non-trivial
Lord Blazing
security
Danitz,
risks,
can protect
it would be
you."
the best way to
Clevy's
avoid
exchange
danger
of glances
if the
with
situation
Cecile
worsened.
and Teague before
Uncle
taking
Sparrow?
the
initiative to step
Donna held
forward.
her brother by the
He
hand
comforted
and
his
trotted to Klein's
employers and
side,
said,
plagued
"Leave
by
your
a belly
questions
full of
to after we get
questions.
back to the White
Klein
Agate."
nodded, pointed to the cabin
Frankly
and said,
speaking, the
"Go
three
back to your room
bodyguards had all
first.
been adventurous
We'll
for
talk
varying
about it
periods
tomorrow."
of time.
The danger
However,
hasn't
their
been
understanding
averted.
of monsters
Donna
was still
nodded
stuck at the level of
obediently.
folklore or
Together with
stories of their
Denton,
drunken peers.
she put her
They
index
still
finger to
found
her
it rather
lips.
surreal,
Shoo.
as though they were in a
After
dream.
the Branch family and the
However,
Timothy family
since they
entered
had
the
seen
cabin,
creatures like
Klein
Murlocs
walked over
before,
to Elland,
it wasn't
took
that
out
hard to
Bishop
accept
Millet's
other
beyond
things,
characteristic,
at most,
and threw it to
they
him.
were a little
If
weirder
there
and
are still
uglier than
mandated
Murlocs.
punishers alive,
When they thought of
return this to
their
them.
hearts calmed significantly.
The beyonder
and the guns
characteristic
in their
left
hands
behind
seemed
by
to
a bishop
regain
who
their
might have
strength.
been a sequence 6
However,
would definitely
the
be
pure
pursued
light
by
that
the Church of
descended from the
Storms,
sky still
and everyone
exceeded
on
their
the White
scope of
Agate would be a
understanding.
target of suspicion.
They only felt that
Klein
their
didn't want to be
worldview,
wanted by the
outlook on
number one
life,
power
and
at sea
values
as
that
soon
had
as
long
he
been
set
formed
sail.
had begun
If
wavering.
none of the mandated
All they could
punishers
do
in
was
Bancy Harbor
temporarily
survived,
ignore it,
and if
suppressing
reinforcements
all
from
their
headquarters
emotions
would
to the
take a while
bottom of
to
their
arrive,
hearts.
leaving
Klein stopped
plenty
at the
of time
door
to
of the
deal with
Green
matter
Lemon
and leave,
restaurant,
then he
raised
would
his
surely
right
be
hand,
reluctant to
and
return
tapped
it
it with
and
his
would find a
fingers.
reason to get it back.
Thump.
Thump.
Elland caught the
Thump.
thumb-sized object.
After he knocked 3
Glancing
times
at
in
it
a rhythmic
doubtfully,
fashion,
he didn't
no
ask
one
what it could
answered
be
and there
used
was
for,
silence.
and he chuckled.
If not for the candlelight
"Don't worry
shining
about
through
the
the
Church
windows
of
and the cracks
Storms
in the door,
investigation.
Klein would have
I'll
thought
hint
it
to
was an
them that
empty
you're with
building that
me.
had long been abandoned.
So, I'll
Thump.
be considered a
Thump.
member of MI9 by the
He
Church of
knocked
Storms?"
3 more times.
Klein nodded
Within
without
the
saying
restaurant,
anything else. The silence
Elland
continued.
looked at Danitz and
Everyone
probingly
seemed to be
asked,
abiding by the
"Blazing?
custom of not responding
Ha ha."
to any knocking in
Danitz
foggy
chuckled
weather.
dryly and took
Klein
a leaf out
retracted
of
his
someone's
right hand
book.
and patted the
Guess.
hem of his
"I don't
double-breasted
think
frock
so
coat.
then."
Suddenly,
replied
he
with
leaned
tacit
back,
understanding.
lifted his knees,
With the simple
and
matters
kicked his
dealt
right
with,
foot forward.
Klein returned
With
to
a
the side of
bang,
the ship
the
and looked at
restaurant's door suddenly
fog-shrouded
opened
Bancy
wide,
Harbor,
and all the
prepared
nails
against
that had
any
fixed the
hidden
copper
dangers.
lock popped out.
Time ticked by,
Wearing a tailcoat,
and the peak of the mountain
boss
next to the
Fox,
shore lit up
with his
once
pudgy,
again with the
nearly
lights
round
of a
face,
thunderstorm.
was still standing in his
Streaks
original
of silver
position.
and violent bolts of lightning
The ladies
swept
and
the area
gentlemen who had
without
chosen to
restraint
stay
before
the
they
night
gradually
all
calmed
opened the
down.
doors one by one and
The
stood
fog in
quietly at
Bancy
the door,
Harbor began to
looking
dissipate,
over without a word,
and the light of the crimson
What do
moon
you
became
want?
clearer.
Fox didn't
"It's
flare
over?"
up. Even
His
after
tone the
seeing
same
this,
as before.
Klein still
However,
didn't dare to
he had a
completely
revolver
relax.
in his hand.
Half an hour
With
later,
his spirit vision
3 men who
activated,
claimed to be mandated
Klein turned his
punishers
head
came
and
to the
looked
dock
around.
to see Captain
He
Elland.
didn't find any
After
traces of
Gammon
evil
Sparrow
on
any of
confirmed
the
it with
humans
divination
present.
and a round of
His gaze
questioning.
landed on the boss
Elland
of the
allowed
restaurant,
the sailors to
and
lower
his
the
gaze
gangway.
turned heavy.
The 3 mandated
He looked
punishers
into the
motioned for
owner's
the
eyes
surrounding
and
crew
asked,
to leave.
"Where's the
Then they
Timothy
lowered their
family?"
voices and
Fox
informed the
repressed
captain
his
of the
emotions,
situation.
as though a
Klein
storm
didn't
was
move
brewing
closer
in his
to
dark
listen,
brown eyes
but
while he
instead
looked
he
at the man
waited
patiently
patiently
for the matter to end.
Finally,
A few
he
minutes later,
unnaturally turned his
Elland
head and
returned
said,
Bishop Millet's
"There's
remaining
another
characteristic to the mandated
Foreigners.
punishers and watched them leave the
Upstairs.
White Agate to deal
Get
with the
them
rest
to
of the
come
mess."
down,"
Phew.
Klein ordered coldly.
Elland exhaled
Fox
and came
was
to Klein
silent
for
for
a few
Danet's
seconds,
side,
until the man
He
quickly
casually
drew his
said
gun
with a
and
tinge
aimed
of
it at his
lingering
head.
fear,
He took
"The
a
matter
deep
has
breath
been
and sent a
resolved.
waiter up to the
There
second
aren't
floor,
any problems.
leading the Timothy
Has
family
it
down
really
the
been
stairs.
solved? What
Klein
happened?"
suddenly thought of
Timothy
Pavel
was a
Court
man
and
who
Melanie
was more
behind
than
the
30
telegraph
years of
office
age.
door.
He
was
was
on
on
vacation
Fox,
with his
the owner of the
newly-wedded
Green
wife.
Lemon restaurant.
Klein
lowered
and the
his
many
gun and
lodgers who had
flatly
watched
said,
them silently.
"Something
Ellen
unexpected has
continued,
happened in
to be
Bansi Harbor.
specific, are
Jace
you coming
discovered
back
the
with me
revival
to the
of
ship or
ancient
staying
customs.
here? Cannibalism and
Something
live sacrifice."
unexpected?
Confirming
While
that a
Timothy
small number of
ruminated
people
over
in
the
Bansi
words,
Harbor had
he
become
saw
heretics.
Ertie
Branch outside nodding at
He
him
hurried
sullenly.
back to the church and reported this
He
to
knew
Bishop
that the other
Millet,
party was a
but
very rich
unbeknownst to
import
him,
and export
the
merchant
person
who
before
had
him
3
was the leader
bodyguards
of the
with him.
heretics,
He
a true
believed that if there were
fallen one.
any unexpected
He had his neck
circumstances,
cut off
by Millet's
then it
wind
would be
blade
safer
and
to stay
died in
with
the
them.
cathedral of
So
the
the
Lord.
answer was obvious.
Millet was about to
As
dispose
for the
of the
unique
body,
customs
but
of
he was
Bansi
discovered by
Harbor,
the servants.
it was just a
Hence,
custom.
things
He
spiraled
held
out
his
of
wife's
control.
hand and walked towards
Some
the
of the
door,
servants were turned
politely
into
smiling
monsters,
as he said,
while some were
"All our
led by the
things are on the
priests to
ship.
hide underground.
Of course we'll stick
Without
with you."
any means to hide
"Thank
himself,
you."
he and
Millet's
his new
quickly
wife
left the
expressed their
cathedral,
gratitude in
gathered
unison,
the heretics,
walked past
and headed for
Klein,
the altar
and
at the
joined with the
mountaintop.
Branch family outside.
The weather changed as a
Klein
result.
withdrew his revolver.
After the
politely
mandated
bowed at
punishers
Fox and
retrieved
said,
3 sealed artifacts.
"Excuse us." They rushed
With
over
that,
and engaged in
he
an
turned
intense
around
battle.
and walked towards
In the
Cleves and
process,
company,
Millet was
who were
injured and
illuminated by
escaped,
the light leaking
while the
out
rest
from
of
the
the
restaurant.
heretics remained to
With a
defend the
thud,
altar,
the
which was
door of the
eventually
Green Lemon
overrun.
restaurant closed
The
once
church's
again,
headquarters has
swaying
already
slightly in
replied,
the wind.
and they'll be sending
Klein had
people to
actually noticed an
investigate the
unusual
cause of
subtle
Bishop
atmosphere
Millet's
just
fall.
now.
But since his spirit vision failed to obtain anything, I told them that we were only able to kill Bishop Millet by joining forces because he was heavily injured. Lest he ignite the huge danger lurking in Bansi Harbor. The mandated punishers have gotten me to get the branch and Timothy and did a head count with the light of the lantern. After giving a general account of the situation, bodyguards, Ellen let out a long sigh of relief, and several servants are all present. The remaining matters. Klein switched the hands in which he held his revolver and relax. He stayed on deck until the clouds appeared to burn when the sun slowly rose, illuminating the entire porch. With a flash of dark golden light, leave their houses an invisible force quickly spread outwards, in the golden sunlight, flooding everyone present and laughing as they headed for their respective jobs. Donna and the others felt as if they had arrived in the south, the breath of human life again. Like they were bathing in warm sunlight that dispersed the cold chill within their bodies. Around. They were no longer as nervous and worried. He had planned to catch up on their courage again, but only after the ship had departed. Obtained from the special cured meat from although he had long been yawning, disappeared along he remained motionless when he saw Gehrman's Sparrow being motionless. Sun Halo on was the way able to enhance the courage of one's companions within a 20-meter radius and purify any evil forces within them. With the help of the brooch and while under the control of Klein's spirituality and psyche, Ellen greeted with a smile. He could use the power of the sun to bypass any targets he didn't wish to help. Sounded. Let's head to the telegraph office first. Klein secretly exhaled. Klein repeated himself deciding to put all his doubts behind him and his revolver. He didn't want to think about Bansi Harbor anymore. After getting his bearings, so he nodded and proceeded forward. Ellen stretched his neck his directions and walked diagonally to the side. I had a mystical feeling that the old Binzi and the modern very professionally took charge of security for the other two flanks. Past him when he with a party of more than 15 people, with a grave expression. It's easy for us to suffer losses once we're attacked. That's the ancient name of Bansi Harbor. Blazing can truly be 400 years ago. What should I do? Binzi Town. Thinking back to the monsters he had encountered, due to its pronunciation and other factors, suddenly slipped the revolver back into his underarm holster and handed the cane to his right palm. He reached into his pocket when he heard the answer and removed the wall of spirituality around an iron cigar case. In Backlund's underground relic had once copper whistle and held it in his hand, the founders of occasionally tossing it up. The former king of angels, he believed that such an action would divert the attention of the undead monsters which only had one head left from the others. Leaving the brass seemed to freeze over, the only thing in their eyes. Inch. This way, I don't have to worry about not being able to rescue them in time. He jerked his gaze back to the effect of an MT. The scenes of the telegraph office sighed and quickened his pace. And the lodgers at this moment, three shriveled heads covered in mold flew out from the thin fog in front of him. Chapter 5. They charged towards Klein from different directions like arrows. Then there might be a high probability that I would have attracted the Rose Redemption or even a hidden red angel. Danet's pupils contracted. There were several times where I danced at the edge of a cliff. Would end up flustered. Luckily, but he also managed to restrain my impulse and curiosity about the weird situation at Green Lemon Restaurant and the telegraph office. Isaac's whistle into the air. Klein retracted his gaze. The heads with esophaguses hanging down from them immediately drew an arc and headed for their primary target. Klein compared to the arrival of without any expression, this unknown and undetonated situation was much more horrifying. All of a sudden, at least, dense golden flames were produced where the copper whistle was as a holy telegraph office's door open. Or if he went around to the back, the three skinny heads let out miserable shrieks at the same time. He constantly imagined all sorts of strange and terrifying scenes, which frightened himself quite forward and reached out to catch Isaac's copper whistle. He decided to produce sun-holy water for the passengers who had eaten another mystical item. In order to avoid any remaining dormant dangers, flabbergasted at how easily the assault had been resolved. Ellen sensed Gehrman Sparrow's abnormality. Timothy and his wife also clearly saw what the things which were attacking them looked like. Powers to keep his facial expression normal. But inside he was glad that he didn't take the risk last night and had now successfully left immediately turned around and nodded seriously. Leave your questions to after we get back to the White Agate. He only had one thought in mind. With that said, she put her finger to her lips. Mimicking was he allowing them to usher in 1,351's remembering the holy aura displayed by the young man in front of him until he had a sufficiently swallowed hard enough strength to explore and reap the corresponding benefits. He fell silent while remaining alert, that he would feel very guilty and end up carrying a heavy burden if something happened during that time. The group continued on through the moonlit streets. Or the lights of the houses on either side of the streets were extinguished, leaving only darkness behind the oriel windows. Losing control. Donna felt as if pairs of eyes were following the matter needed to be done in a correct and astute manner. No one showed up. Klein wasn't foolish enough to tell Ellen directly or write an anonymous letter to the Church of Storms, tight and walked amidst the protective circle of her parents. First, suddenly, the authorities would definitely investigate Gehrman Sparrow's background. He wore a black cloak and leaned forward, if thorough investigations were made. Bleeding. Secondly, there was nothing above the neck might be exposed to the Rose Redemption, the cloak reflecting which might attract a king of angels' pursuit. The headless figure let out a intended to do was to use the world to mention the anomaly in Bansi Harbor when a tarot gathering was held in 2 days. Slightly shook. He would then have the fool to lightly allude to Rose Redemption and the king of angels. This infamous pirate cursor flung an orange-yellow fireball which had been repeatedly compressed from his hand. This would be a chance for him to perform a deed of merit, causing the headless man to retreat several steps. As for the blood of the direct descendants of the Medici family, and his
Klein
skin
didn't
quickly
even
charred
consider
while
it,
his cloak was
because
set on
neither
fire.
he nor Miss Sharon had the
However,
intention
to the
of
monsters
rescuing
that
the
had
evil
already
spirit
lost
in
their
the underground
lives,
relic,
this wasn't a
noticing
serious
that Gairman
injury.
Sparrow
And
obviously
in that
didn't want to
instant,
mention
with
his
a crisp
past,
crack, Ellen
the
chuckled,
scarlet flame
took
on the
out a
black
small
cloak
black
suddenly
wooden
soared
box
into the air,
and tossed it over.
as if it were blooming.
Klein reached out
Klein,
and caught
in his
it,
coat,
using his
jumped out of
eyes
the
to
flames,
express his puzzlement.
borrowing the momentum
The
from his
bladder
fall
of
and
the
his own
murloc.
strength in order to
It
stab
can
the
be
cane
used
he
to
held
make
in both
items.
hands directly into
It's
the
very
headless
useful
man's
at
neck.
sea. Splat.
The
The
beyonder
cane sank
ingredient
into the
of a
headless
murloc,
man's body and
worth more
emerged
than
from his crotch.
150 pounds.
The
Klein's
captain's
back
sure
muscles
is
bulged,
generous.
forcefully
Klein had
throwing
almost
the headless
forgotten how
monster to the
Gairman
ground.
Sparrow should react.
Taking advantage of this
Fortunately,
opportunity,
he stood
had a
behind
lot
the
of
monster
experience
and
in
continued to
acting.
grip the cane
He
tightly while
immediately
he sank
poured
his
his spirituality
spirituality into the
"I
sun
didn't
brooch.
save you for a reward."
He had already used his spirit
Ellen
vision to
laughed
determine
and
that
said,
holy light
"I'm
summoning,
not giving you this
cleave
in
of
return for
purification,
saving me,
and fire of
Aren't
light
we
were
friends
all unable
now?
to deal with this
Isn't it
blackish
normal
green
to help
monster
a
in a
friend
short
make
amount
up
of
for his
time,
shortcomings
so
when
he
he
could
doesn't
only
have
use
such
another
items?"
items? What he said
5
makes
seconds.
sense.
4
There's no
seconds.
way to refute
3
him at all.
seconds.
Klein held on to the small
with
black
all
box
his might,
and remained
but like a
silent for a few
snake,
seconds.
he fell to his
Finally,
knees and was
he
firmly
nodded.
nailed to the ground by the
Ellen
cane.
covered his mouth
2
as he yawned
seconds.
before taking
1
off his
second.
boat-shaped hat.
Klein opened
I
his
need
mouth
to
and
return
spat
to my
out a
room
word
to
in
catch up on
ancient
my
Hermes.
sleep. See you at noon.
Specks of radiance
Klein
appeared
waved
and turned
politely
into
and
water
led
droplets
Danitz
that
towards
sprinkled
room
over the
312.
headless man's body.
He saw that Donna and
Sizzle.
Denton were up
When the
early
blackish
and
green
waiting at the
gas
door.
was emitted,
Uncle Sparrow,
Klein let go of
what's
his
that
cane
in
and
your
took 2
hand?
steps to the
Donna
side.
asked
Within the
curiously.
sparse rain,
Klein didn't
the
say
headless man
anything and directly
continuously
opened the
twitched
lid of the
before
small
finally
black
calming down,
box.
eventually
The interior
melting
was
into
lined
a
with
pool
a
of
layer
blood.
of black velvet.
No beyonder
and sitting in the middle was a
characteristics.
round,
This
gem-like,
means it's not the real
transparent
enemy.
object.
At
It
most,
had a blue,
it can be
aqueous
considered as
luster
a
that
created
swirled outwards.
servant. That day,
Klein
the
withdrew his
Murlocs,
cane, Denton
turned,
thought for a
and
moment,
walked
back to the group.
bladder. So
At
cool.
this moment,
At
Denton
Klein's
let out a
signal,
belated
Janet's
cheer.
opened the door.
Donna's eyes
Donna
sparkled.
walked in briskly
He was
while
still
stretching out
borrowing
her
the
hand from
powers of a
behind
mystical
her.
item.
She held a thick
However,
wad of cash
his
that were a
phasing
mix
away
of
during the
£10 and
flames has
£5 notes.
indicated his true strength.
My father, my
He
mother,
really isn't
Uncle
easy to deal
Clevy's,
with, and Uncle
Blazing
Timothy's
Danitz
family
retracted
asked me
his
to
gaze,
pass this to you.
feeling that his
A
decision
total of
not to mindlessly
150
run off had been
pounds.
extremely wise.
Donna smiled
7
sweetly.
or 8 minutes later,
They said that
the
this
group
isn't
that
enough
cleared
to
out
express
2
their
more
gratitude.
waves of monsters
It's
arrived
just
at
to
the
replenish
Banshee
the supplies
telegraph
you
office.
used. Clevy's took
Those
the
things are
initiative and
expensive,
knocked on
right?
the door.
Who
Still
is
all
it?
right. A gentle
Klein
female
thought for a
voice
moment.
came from
Then he
inside.
accepted the
We're looking for the
£150
captain of the
gratuity
White
so that
Agate,
Ertie and
Mr.
other
Allen.
ordinary people wouldn't
Clevy's
feel
answered through
uneasy.
the door.
In
Seeing
the
Uncle
quiet
Gairman
night,
Sparrow put
the
the
woman's
cash and the
voice
small
spoke at
black
a
wooden
moderate
box into
pace.
his pocket.
He and
Donna
his
was
first
relieved
mate
that
went
she had
next door
finally
to the
completed the
cathedral.
task her parents
The
had handed
person
her.
speaking sounds
She
odd,
quickly got into
or is she
character
like that
and
only
found
on
her
similar
true intention
nights?
for visiting.
Klein flicked a
She
gold
asked
coin and
curiously and
confirmed that
feared
she
that
wasn't lying.
Uncle Sparrow,
As they were
what kind
preparing
of
to
monsters
leave,
were those
the
last
female
night?
voice in the
Are
telegraph
ghost
office
stories
hesitated
true?
and said,
Were you born with the ability to
can you
jump out of the
guys
flames and let
help
light
me
descend? Take note
Is
of this
someone?
magic?
He's
Or
my
witchcraft?
colleague.
He went out before the wind started to night.
Stop,
And never
you have
came
too
back.
many questions.
His name,
Klein,
who
is
couldn't
Pavo
stand
Court.
the heat any longer, took off the sun brooch and
Chapter
threw it on the
5:10.
desk in the living room. The returning
He
Bishop
casually
Pavo
replied
cried at the same time.
Clevy's didn't directly
They're called
answer the
beyonder
woman
powers,
behind the telegraph
those that are
office's
obtained
door.
through certain rituals
He
and
turned to
potions.
glance at Gairman
A lot
Sparrow,
of ghost stories
waiting
have
for his
archetypes,
decision.
and last
In the
night's
eyes of this
monsters
former
were created
adventurer,
by an evil
it was a
ritual.
difficult task for
Ask
15
him about
people
the
to get
rest.
back to the White
Klein
Agate
glanced
safely.
sideways
They
at
couldn't and
Danitz.
shouldn't be distracted by
magical.
helping her search for someone.
Denton and Donna sighed.
However, he was
then
well
Donna
aware
said
that the
her
current
eyes
pillar of
shining.
support was
Uncle
Gairman
Sparrow
Sparrow
and
You're
Blazing
just like the
Danitz.
Superman
They were
described
the
by
only
Emperor
ones who had
Roselle.
the right to
Can
decide
we?
on the matter.
Can we
Klein
also
become
remain
people
silent
like
for
you
2
through
seconds?
rituals and potions?
Then he spoke in a measured
Denton
voice.
nodded heavily.
What does he look
echoing
like?
his sister's words. He
And
believed
both
that
of
having
them
more
felt a surge of
information would
strong
help them escape
anticipation.
this strange,
At
foggy
that
city.
moment,
So
Donna
he casually
noticed
asked
Gairman
in passing.
Sparrow's eyes turn
As for whether he
melancholic.
would help take note
Soon
of the
after,
person's whereabouts,
she saw the mouth of
it
this
all
magical
depended on
uncle
what
open
happened
up,
next.
revealing a
While
somewhat
inquiring,
strange smile.
Klein also
Klein
warned himself
said in a
not to
low
pursue the
voice,
matter too deeply. This isn't something to be envied or anticipated.
The danger dormant in Bansi
As long as you
Harbor.
choose this path,
Between understanding the situation and avoiding the risks
and madness,
he had to engage in a
you can
balancing
beat them
act.
100 times,
No more,
1,000
no
times.
less.
But as
Without
long as you
leaning
lose
too far
once,
left or
you'll
right.
end up like that
This
fallen
might
bishop.
be an easy or difficult feat.
As he spoke,
because
he
no
leaned
one
on his
knew what
cane,
would happen
took
once
off
he
his
took the
suit,
step,
and rolled up
he
the
could only
sleeves of his
judge
shirt.
based on his
One
experience
of his
and
arms
intuition,
was shriveled and
he
wrinkled,
could fall into a pit
as though
at any
he were a
time.
centenarian.
This left
The
Klein
other was
highly stressed
translucent
as his
and
mind
colorless,
whirled at an
with a direct
unprecedented
view of the
speed.
blood vessels,
In the dense
muscles,
darkness and
and
thin
aponeurosis
fog,
beneath
the telegraph
skin.
office's door
At the same
remained
time,
tightly shut.
His face
The
grew
woman
dense
inside
pale
paused
flesh
and
granules
said,
that made Donna and
"He's
Denton
a
fall
very
backward in
handsome
terror
man.
and slam into the door.
He has 2 eyes,
with thin
2
flesh
ears,
granules growing
a
on his
nose,
face,
and a mouth."
Klein maintained his
Why
smile.
does this answer sound
See
so
this?
scary?
This is madness.
Is there something wrong
No.
with this woman?
Donna and Denton,
According to
almost
the
lost their
customs of
minds,
Bansi Harbor,
stumbled through the
she
door
shouldn't have
and
even
ran
responded.
After a few
Blazing
steps,
Dannets had the
they
urge
fell
to kick
the
open the
ground,
door,
unable
rush
to
into
keep
the
their
telegraph
balance.
office,
and checked the situation inside. Denton kept crying in a low voice. At that moment, they heard the door to room 312 clang shut. Storm Cathedral. Donna gradually briefly stated their destination. Not daring to think of Gammon Sparrow's appearance whether there was anything wrong with the woman at the telegraph office. The flesh granules had occupied how he didn't delve into the secrets of the owner of the Green Lemon restaurant shriveled and customers who had chosen to stay the night. Than the monsters of the wind was getting lighter. For some reason, she recalled his eyes. The candlelight from the cathedral was shining through the narrow windows high above, suddenly blurred, like a beacon in a storm. And she couldn't stop the tears from rolling down her cheeks. Sun halo again. Donna and the others regained some of their courage. Denton was so frightened by her reaction that he forgot his fear. Onto the last straw. Donna sobbed and said, "They hurriedly walked on the empty streets in silence. I just feel very, very sad. Soon they arrived outside the Storm Cathedral. Inside, the doors were shut tight. Seeing that Klein had returned to normal emblem on the door, Danitz couldn't help but click his hand and knocked 3 times. Actually, there's no need to scare the children like this. They'll have nightmares." A vigilant male voice just tell them that taking potions is dangerous. Who is it? Just as he finished his sentence, Klein replied straight away. He saw a hard wooden cane covered in blood and dirt flying over, Captain Ellen, accompanied by a sentence that wasn't in the least bit emotional. Ellen asked again without opening the door. Danitz reached out to grab the cane as the smile on his face froze. "You helped me pay White Shark's compensation, Empress Burrow." After a moment of surprise and amusement, family's luxurious mansion, Ellen made an initial confirmation that behind the white and gold railings on the second floor. At the very least, the servants on the first floor monster adept at disguising would have known something that was privy to the customs of the Lone Kingdom. He still felt hesitant until leave Backland 1 week after the New Year ball, and they would return to their own succession, where they would enjoy a pleasant life in the countryside or in a castle. Paris. In June, they would return to the capital, where they would socialize day after day. Of course, a banker with actual power and wealth like Earl Hall definitely needed to make trips between the 2 places to handle many matters. However, his conclusion from the situations from before. Many things had to be tidied up Donna and the others in, and some of the servants would bring them back to the manor or castle. The priest only after everything was ready would the masters begin their journey. And Bishop Millet is nowhere to be found. I should be sitting in a steam train back to Eastchester County. The servants in the church are all gentlemen really can get the fruit of the tree of elders and the blood of the mirror dragon, so that I can become a psychiatrist before I leave Backland. This is a little problematic. Audrey allowed her thoughts to wander. Gripped the cold Azek's copper whistle. Lady Caitlin came over and asked with a smile, "Of course, Penny, for your thoughts?" He was very clear that the priest and the bishop weren't the main force of the Church of Storm. When you get back to Backland in June, you'll be able to find something to do. There was definitely a mandated Punisher team formed out of 6 to 8 beyonders, and directly replied, as well as an indefinite number of sealed join the church's charity organizations. Even high-sequence beyonders wouldn't be able to wipe out this force in a short span of time without causing a stir. As long as they're alive and able to use sealed artifacts, after giving her some advice, shouldn't be too terrible. She walked down to the second floor at this point and began to inspect the affairs of the family. What is the mandated Punisher team doing? Audrey withdrew her emotions on his previous experience as a Nighthawk. With a faint smile, made a guess of the standard large golden retriever that was sitting to her side. In the process, he followed Ellen to the prayer hall and examined the body of the deceased priest. You can run as much as you want in the green pastures and in the lush woods. As if his head had been decapitated while he was still alive. She had only become a gift because she wasn't a qualified foxhound. His esophagus and head instinctively wanted to stick her tongue out, kind spirit but she stopped herself like a cultured lady. Had any remnant she answered without hiding her emotions. It would be very difficult to have a successful spirit channeling ritual. But I hate those barbaric fellows. Is it due to a unique killing technique? Are you referring to the foxhounds that fathered in the other's rear? It's different from the monsters outside. To stop herself from smiling. Was it because the operation happened in a rush and saw that it was almost time for the tarot gathering? Klein concluded his previous speculation. He felt that there were 2 possibilities. Chapter 5:14. 1. Legends of ancient gods above the endless grey fog. Perhaps a living sealed artifact or a mid-sequence beyonder. Just as Edmund White, who had arrived here once again, regained his vision. It escaped the cathedral and killed Jace while looking at the end of the mottled long table before changes in Fancy Harbor. Good afternoon, the bishop, Fool, priests, and mandated punishers were in desperate pursuit, starting with the Fool and ending with the world, or get rid the perpetrator. This order wasn't according to the seating arrangement, had been led underground, but by the order of the tarot protection of the remaining mandated punishers. The beginning that contained all possibilities. But this didn't explain the strange behavior of the residents of Fancy Harbor. This was a little obsessive compulsive disorder on Miss Audrey's god of weather had been resurrected in a number of people in Fancy Harbor. It started to appear with the increasing number of tarot club members with the descriptions of flesh and blood consumption and the sacrificial rituals and the burying of heads deliberately passed a deep judgment and due to some unknown reason responded to the greeting. This group of people had raided the cathedral and killed Reverend Jess. The sun through the corner of his eye. The rest of the population had more or less understood the situation, but they had opted for silence. They might have already assaulted the area underground and are currently engaged in an intense battle know
with the
about.
mandated punishers.
There are indeed differences
priests,
between
and
professional
the
researchers and amateur
sealed
enthusiasts.
artifacts.
But from this
They
week
might have
onwards,
transformed all the
Emlyn
servants
White
into monsters
would be a
or thrown them
professional
out.
researcher. It can also
Baron
be that they're under
Waymandy
pursuit
has never
from the
mentioned
beyonders of the
anything
Church of
related to the
Storms,
City of Silver,
and the servants have
so I
been
can't
sent
ask him
underground to
directly.
receive protection
As
to
the
prevent
secret
any
messiah of
accident.
the Sanguine who is
From the
burdened
fact
with
that
Jace's
secrets,
corpse
I
hasn't
have
been
to be
used.
careful in such
There's
matters.
a possibility that it's the
Attending
latter
class for
development.
half a day and going
If
to
I
the
were to head
cathedral for half a
underground
day
to
before
confirm the
accompanying the
situation,
dolls at night
I'll
seems to be a
definitely
pretty
be
good
attacked
life.
since we're unfamiliar
Emlyn's
beyonders
thoughts
gradually dispersed.
Besides,
The remnant
suddenly,
strength
he
might not be
frowned and
sufficient.
realized
a very
Klein
important
looked at the
question.
priest on the ground
Why
and
do I
realized
still
that
go
his
to the
beyonder
harvest church every
characteristic
day?
had condensed into
Yes,
a blue
as a
sapphire
noble
by his
sanguine.
neck. I must
He
put an
retracted
end to
his
the
gaze
things I
and
start.
didn't pick up the
There
item.
have been a lot of
He
patients
didn't want to
recently.
attract the violent retaliation from the
Having your
short-tempered
reputation
Church of Storms
spread
isn't a
so
good
he
thing.
turned to Elend and
Emlyn's
Harris.
brow gradually
Let's return
relaxed
to the
into a
ship
softer
first.
frown.
He
He
casually
saw that
tossed
Miss
the gold
Justice
coin
had
and
completed her
confirmed that there was
greetings.
no battle currently
He
going on
raised his hand
underground.
to knock on the
In
table
any
and
case,
looked at her.
regardless
The
of whether
things
there
you
were any
need.
mandated
Audrey
punishers
pressed her right
present,
hand down
the
and made a
cathedral
gesture to
grounds
stop
were
him
no
before
longer
saying with a
suitable for
faint
prolonged
smile,
stays. We'll talk about
After
this during
all,
the transaction
Klein wasn't
period.
sure if his guess
This
was
is
right,
Mr. Fool's
and he
reading
could only
time.
make the safest
Based
choice.
on Mr. Vampire's tone.
All right.
There must
Elend
be at
had
least
no
one
desire
of the
to
fruits
stay
of the
here
tree of
either.
elders and the
Being
blood
in
of
a
a mirror
situation
dragon.
where he waited
Audrey,
nervously for any
you're going to be a
changes befall him.
psychiatrist soon.
As long as he
You're
returned
about
to the
to
White
become a
Agate,
mid-sequence
he would have
beyonder.
many cannons
Audrey's
and
mood
many sailors
became
that could
increasingly
withstand
cheerful
accidents
to a certain
The
extent.
corners of her eyes
After
filled
a short
with smiles.
rest,
The group
she
left
looked
the
towards the
cathedral.
figure amidst the thick
With the
fog
addition
and said
of
with an
Elend and
uplifted tone
Harris,
towards the end.
the team's defense
Honorable
clearly
Mr.
became
Fool,
much tighter.
I've gotten another 3
Klein
Roselle
no longer
diary
needed to
pages,
toss the
just
copper
short of
whistle to
4
attract the
pages.
monsters. She pursed
So
her
he
lips
stuffed it
while
back
in
into his
thought.
pocket. Shall we send a telegram to the Church of
With
Storms
Miss
headquarters
Justice setting
to
an
report
example,
on
Banffers
Banffers
also said.
Mr. Fool,
After a
I
few
also have
steps,
3 new pages
Elend
of
made a
Roselle's
cautious
diary.
suggestion. She
This
was
way,
also full of
even if there were
anticipation
major
for this tarot
unforeseen
gathering
events,
because her
as
second
long as they
apprentice
held
potion
on,
had been
they would
digested
eventually
much
be
faster
saved.
than expected.
Klein
The
didn't
dormant
object.
dangers had already
Walking
been
through the thin
completely
fog ahead
eliminated
of
the
him,
day
he calmly
before
said,
yesterday.
We'll pass
Derek
by the
followed
telegraph
immediately.
office. Honorable
Phew.
Mr. Fool,
Blazing
I've
Danitz
copied some
breathed a
legends
sigh
of
of relief.
ancient gods. Then his heart skipped a
Then, he
beat.
said to the hanged
He was
man,
afraid that
I've
the
also
Church of Storms
tabulated
would
the
perform
list of monsters
investigations
around
and
the
discover
area.
that an infamous
He
pirate had
really
played
is a
an
good
important role
child
in
who
this
doesn't
matter.
need anyone
And
to
by
remind
then,
him.
he would probably
Klein,
still be
who
trapped
had
on
a
the
rich
White
harvest,
Agate. Although
sighed
I
with
saved
emotion.
people, the mandated
Seriously,
punishers
he
aren't
hasn't
friendly to
improved
those
at
who
all.
don't belong to them. Even though this will lower
Especially
the
when I'm a
difficulty of
pirate.
me obtaining
Stumped
benefits
for a moment,
it also
Danitz
conceals the risk
decided
of
to
me
get over
losing
the
immediate
immediate
danger
from the
before
city of
considering
Silver.
other matters.
Exposure is a
After
problem that
walking for a
requires
while,
constant
they
vigilance.
saw the telegraph office
Alger
in
shook
sight.
his head
A faint
indiscernibly.
yellow light suddenly
Roselle's
emerged
diary
from the
and the
side
legend of
street
the
and
ancient
approached
gods
them from
soon
the depths
appeared
of
in
the
the palm
fog.
of Klein's hand.
It was a middle-aged man
He
carrying
skimmed
a
through it
lantern.
quickly and found
It
that
was a
two of the
middle-aged
6 pages
man
in the
carrying
diary
a
were
hurricane
repetitions
lamp
of the past.
He wore a
For
dark
example,
blue bishop robe
one of Miss
embroidered with the
Justice's
symbol of the
contributed
storm.
pages matched a
His
page
head was
which the
bowed
hanged
and his
man had
face was
handed over
pale.
last year.
He was wheezing
That's
as he
inevitable
staggered
unless
while
I can
walking.
really teach them
Elend
simplified
focused and
Chinese.
blurted out.
Klein
Bishop
sighed and
Millet?
willed the 2
The
diary pages
middle-aged
to the
man
back.
looked up.
The
raised
remaining
his
4
hurricane lamp
pages
and
didn't
said,
contain very
"Elend,
valuable
is it?"
information.
At this moment,
most of them
Klein
belonged to
took
the
a
step
period
back,
when Roselle had
letting
lost his
Elend
ideals and
stand
was
out.
obsessed with money. And the
He
text
didn't
was
wish for
filled
the
with
Bishop of the
sentences
Church
such
of
as,
Storms
"What
to
did
pay
I
no
invent
to
today?
him.
What will I
Danitz even
invent
shrunk his
tomorrow?
neck back,
How many gold coins
using
can it be
Ertie's
sold
plump
for?
body to
Or
block
how much
himself.
investment I received?"
Yes, Your
It
Excellency.
nearly made Klein
Jace
lose
is dead.
control of his
What
expression.
happened?
Wishing to smack
Elend
these
wasn't a
diary
novice,
pages in Roselle's
so
face.
he didn't directly
At
step
this moment,
forward.
Audrey
Bishop
keenly
Millet
discovered
coughed
that
and
the
said,
dark emperor
"An
had
old
returned
custom
to
has
the
been
side of Mr.
revived,
Fool's hand
and a group
was
of
placed
heathens with
face
dirty
down.
blood running through
So
their
it
veins
really
are
was
beginning to
bestowed
offer
to
live
his adorer.
sacrifices and are
Was it
consuming
to
their
help
flesh
him
and
complete
blood.
a mission?
Jace noticed that they were
Or is there
problematic
another
and ended up
possibility
being killed
that
by
this
them.
is a new card
The
of
matter
blasphemy
can no longer
and
be
not the
covered
original
up.
one?
They used
Audrey
the
guessed
sacrificial
with
ritual
interest.
to change the weather
After
and
flipping
tried
through
to
the
attack
diary
the
pages,
cathedral.
Klein
They
resisted the urge to take a deep breath to calm his heart, fled to the mountain, and he looked at the legends of the ancient god provided by Little Sunday.
I was injured in combat.
Without
it
being able to
divided
hold
the
out much
ancient
longer,
gods of the second
all I could
epic
do was
into
slowly
three
make
camps.
my way back.
The giant king,
Just as
Ormer,
he finished speaking,
the elf king,
a bright ball of
Sinaithrim,
light burst
and
out
the
of the
vampire
distant
ancestor
fog,
Lilith,
as if countless
allies
bolts
who
of
fought
lightning
against
were
the dragon of
striking down.
imagination.
With the help of
Anquelt,
this light, the phoenix
Klein and the
ancestors
other,
could see the
Greggrace,
fog-covered
and the
mountain range
mutated
by the
king,
shore faster,
as well as the peak
as for
which
the
was
devil
connected
monarch,
to thunderstorms.
Farbody and the
To a
annihilation
certain
demonic wolf
extent,
Fleegria.
this confirmed
They were the
Bishop
ones who
Millet's
wanted to
claim.
subvert all order
Ellen
and
was
corrupt
about to
all
step
living
forward
beings.
to support the Storm
In the
Bishop
records
when
of
he
the
saw
city of
Gehrman's
Silver,
pharaoh take
the
out a gold
ancient
coin and
gods
mutter
were
in a low
described as
voice.
violent,
He has
evil,
ill intentions.
cruel, and terrifying. The gold coin flew up and then tumbled in the air
Even
before
the
landing
ancestor
in Klein's
vampire
palm,
Lilith,
who
heads facing up.
superficially looked the most normal and was described as the embodiment of
Chapter
beauty,
5:11
had a disgusting and
Snitch
ferocious
Halo
side.
whoosh.
For
A strong
instance,
gale blew
she would
out from
manifest
Bishop
into
Millet's
a
body,
mountain range of
lifting
flesh.
up his dark blue
On top
bishop
of it grew
robes.
all kinds of reproductive organs as they
crack,
spewed out
crack,
thick black fog while
crack,
constantly producing
crack.
all sorts of
The
strange
branches of the
creatures.
nearby trees
all
snapped as they
powerhouses who
flew into
approached
the
her.
air.
would be
Donna's
overwhelmed
body
by the desire to
involuntarily
mate
rose a
and
few
reproduce,
meters into the air
becoming
before
a
being
walking
thrown
organ,
out several meters.
and all living beings who saw this
ached all
scene,
over when
other
she
than the
fell
other
to the
ancient
ground.
gods,
It
would
wasn't
lose
just
their
her.
minds without
Cecile,
exception or mutated
Denton,
on the spot.
Timothy,
while
Harris,
others became
and
crazy.
the others were all
The
blown up
records
by
of
the
the
wind
city of
and
Silver
landed in different
originated
spots.
from the ancient texts
Only
of the
Cleves,
giant king's
Teague, and
court.
Erdi,
Either
course,
because
that
of their
was what they
training or
claimed.
abnormally heavy weight,
I cannot eliminate
staggered
the
to the ground
possibility
and
that
tumbled
this
a few
is to discredit
times.
an ally.
Elend, who
This
was facing
aspect is
Bishop
rather
Millet
similar
directly,
to the loss of
did a
control of
series
the
of retreating
primordial
and
moon
backward
with
somersaulting
sanguine
actions.
Is this
Dodging
one
the
of the
incoming
traits when
blow
one
from
follows
the
the
wind.
moon pathway
Klein
to
and
the end?
Danitz didn't attempt to
At this
resist
thought,
it head-on.
Klein almost
Instead,
raised his head to
they
sweep
flew
his
backwards
backwards at
like
Emlyn
kites.
White.
Although
In the
they looked
legends
like
of
they
the
were
city
about
of
to
Silver,
collapse to the
the
ground,
vampire
they
ancestor,
ultimately
Lilith,
managed to keep their
really
balance.
did control the crimson
As soon
moon.
as the hurricane
As
stopped,
long as she wanted,
six figures
she
emerged
could make
from
the
the
blood moon
dispersing
appear
fog.
every day for
They were all wearing
365
black
days a
cloaks
year,
and were headless,
allowing the negative
left
energy
with
to
only
rampage
bleeding
through the
necks.
lands and the
Their
spirit
hoods
world
were
to
supported
interact
up
with
by the
reality
eddies
for an
of the
extended
hurricane.
period of time.
Gasp! Releasing
Gasp.
countless
Their
unspeakable
throats
monsters
emitted
and
the
evil
low grunts of a
spirits.
beast like
This
the
is the
moment
power
before
of
they
a
were ready
deity.
to attack.
I wonder what the difference is between the ancient gods and the current true
thin and
gods.
sharp wind blades
Why
shot
do
out,
all of them look like
leaving
evil
a clear
gods?
and deep rift where
In the
Klein was
legends of the
somersaulting.
sanguine,
Tap,
Lilith isn't
tap,
like that.
Tap.
One
From
of them
both
is
sides
lying
of the
between the two
lantern-wielding
of them,
Bishop Millet,
or could it
whose
be
dark
that there was
blue
a
bishop
change
robe had
midway?
flared up slightly.
From the one recorded
Six
in the city of
headless men
Silver
rushed
to
at
the one
Klein,
depicted in the
Elend,
legends of the
and the
sanguine,
others,
Klein
looked
looked away
until
and
it
took
trembled.
note of the details.
One headless monster is
He
already
made the
hard
paper
enough
in
to
his
deal
hands
with,
vanish and
but
leaned
now
back
there are
slightly.
6 of them.
You
And
may
there's
begin.
even a bishop who's
With her bright
obviously
eyes,
corrupted.
Audrey looked at
When
Emlyn
blazing
White and
Danitz saw
immediately
this
said,
scene, he
"Mr.
couldn't
Moon,
help but feel
do you
his
have
scalp
news
tingle.
of the fruit of the tree
At
of
this
elders and the
moment,
blood of a
a
mirror
bronze
dragon?"
beam streaked
Emlyn
past his
nodded
eyes
his
and
chin
shot
and
into
said,
the distance.
"A total of
Dang,
750
dang,
pounds.
As
Just
if
pay
copper
this
whistle
amount
dropped
and
to
they'll
the
be
ground
yours."
and bounced a few
And
times.
of course,
There's
with a
my
whoosh,
payment.
the 6 headless men
100
changed
pounds.
direction at the same time.
Audrey didn't
Rushing
bother with the
towards the
total price
location
at
where
all
Essex
and happily
Copper Whistle
responded,
came to a stop.
"Deal.
Leaving
I
Bishop
hope that the
Millet
deal will
standing
be
alone in
completed
his
today
original
or
spot.
tomorrow."
Klein seized the
No
opportunity,
problem.
lifted his left
Emlyn,
hand,
who was about to
tearing
make
off the
100
sunbrooch
pounds,
inside his coat,
couldn't
and
refuse
threw
Miss
it to Captain
Justice's
Elend,
request.
who was closest to him.
Awesome.
He
Audrey
shouted
lowered her right
succinctly,
hand,
"Inject
clenched
it
it
into
into
your
her fist,
reality,"
and lightly
5
pumped it
seconds.
twice.
Holy
At that
water.
moment, Alger,
After saying
turned his
this,
head to
he
look at
ignored
Mr.
his silk top
Vampire.
hat that had been
"Do you
blown
still
away,
want the
and
inheritance
instead,
of that
he bent his
sanguine
body,
baron?
dashing towards Bishop Millet in a
4,500
zigzag
pounds.
manner.
That's the best price I
so,
managed to
so,
get for you."
One after another,
In fact,
wind
the
blades
pirate
were
was
shot
willing
out
to
in
give it
close
up for
succession,
3,200
all of them aimed at
pounds.
Klein.
Emlyn's
In a flash,
expression twisted.
the ground showed signs of being cut and slashed. "If it's only 1,000
Klein
pounds,
either
then I'll
somersaulted,
definitely take
lunging
it.
forward,
Or jumping
he
up by
replied
supporting his
inwardly,
body with his hands
although
to
their
avoid
family
the first
members were
round of
pretty good
concentrated
apothecaries
fire.
and doctors.
The dark
With a
red
modest
light in
annual
Bishop
income
Millet's
and
eyes
long
grew
lives that
brighter
allowed
as he
them to
raised
save
his
a fortune.
hands. Emlyn had been unable to save any money since he became infatuated
At this
with
moment,
dolls. The wind
from time
blades
to time,
inundated him
he
like a
would order
machine
some
gun.
custom dolls.
Klein only had
Even
enough
if the
time to
100
dodge half
pounds
of
which
it
he
before
hadn't
his body
received
was
yet was
torn
counted.
apart.
His
Turning
personal
into thin
savings
and
didn't
light
even
shreds of
reach
paper that
500
flew into
pounds,
the air.
of which
Klein appeared in another
150
direction
pounds had been
and continued
contributed
by
by
Detective
Detective
Sherlock
Millet.
Moriarty, trying to close the distance
I'll
between
think
them
about
to an
it again,
effective distance.
Emlyn said with difficulty.
After catching the
Suddenly
sunbrooch,
feeling that he had to
Elend
find some way
immediately
to
felt
quickly
the
save
heat.
up money.
He wished that
This
he could
fellow
take off his
Emlyn
clothes and
just
jump
made
into
the sound
freezing
of poverty.
water.
Upon
He
seeing
thought
this
for a
scene,
moment about the words
Klein
Gammon
happily
Sparrow
quipped
had left him
inwardly.
before taking out
Being
a
friends with
tin-colored
Mr.
alcohol
Vampire
flask
in
from the
reality,
inside of his
Klein
clothes,
had heard him mention that
unscrewed
over
the
the
lid,
years,
and
he had
poured out
spent
all
more
of
than
the lanty-proof
7,000 pounds on
inside.
dolls,
The strong
which made
aroma
Klein
of the
marvel
wine
at the price
rapidly
of puppets
spread
and
in
how
all
extravagant
directions.
Emlyn was.
Blazing
Danitz
No
looked
problem.
around.
The
Feeling
hanged man
certain of
didn't
the
press
situation,
further.
he
With a
turned to
grimace,
Audrey.
he
"My
genuflected
fair lady,
and suddenly
the
pressed
artisan
both
has
his palms
completed the
onto
work
ground.
and has obtained a
Two
rather
scarlet
mystical
fire
item.
serpents appeared out
It
of thin
allows you
air,
to truly change
clinging
your
to the
appearance
ground
while
as they
also
spread
providing
towards
you with
Essex
3
Copper
beyond
Whistle
powers.
and created 4
Flame
burning walls of
controlling,
fire.
damage
His
transfer,
original plan
and
had been to
danger
throw
a fireball at Bishop Millet.
It improves your balance and agility.
Use the flames to
It's a
easily
silver
jump
mask,
towards the bishop,
but it can
and
also
launch an
be a
attack.
hat or an earring.
However, after
it can
seeing
change
that
its
the area
appearance,
around the
and
bishop
you can
was
name
filled
it.
with freezing
Of
gales,
course,
it
he
also
rationally
has its
gave
own
up on the
minor
idea.
flaws.
He was
When you
prepared
wear
to
it,
first clean
your
up the
emotions
headless
will be
monsters to
amplified,
prevent them from
and you must
disturbing
learn
their
how to control your
ability
ability to use his true
It costs
strength.
5,500
Teague,
At this
and
point,
Harris had
the
already
hangman
stood up
chuckled
again
and said
and
to
had
the
drawn their
world,
guns.
The Beyonder
They
characteristic
surrounded
you
Erdie,
provided earns you
Donna, and
4,500
pounds,
guarding
and the
them against
artisan's
any other
workmanship is
monsters
worth
that might appear.
£1,000.
Their experience taught them that,
4,500
without any
pounds,
prior teamwork
much better than
training,
I had expected.
it was best not to
Even though there's
interfere
a
in a battle that was
15%
beyond
commission,
that of ordinary
that is to say,
humans. 675 pounds for Mr.
tap.
Hanged Man.
The 6 headless
Klein
men,
immediately
oblivious
controlled
to the
the burning
world and
flames,
nodded in agreement,
burst through the
that
scarlet
wouldn't
walls
be
of
an
fire
issue.
and began to pounce onto
Emotions
Azek's
would be
copper whistle like
amplified.
ravenous dogs.
According to Miss
This
Escalante,
gave Ellen time
I'll
to
have the
inject his
ability to influence
spirituality
the
into
moods
the
and
mental
mental
states
with
of other
composure.
people when I advanced to
After the holy
psychiatrist.
water condensed,
I should be able
he
to do
dripped
the
them
same
into
for
the
myself.
alcohol flask.
Yes, seeing
That
the headless
flaw
people
isn't
in
a
a
problem.
frenzied bunch,
Audrey nodded
Janet's heart
lightly.
skipped a beat.
I will pay within 2
He bent
days of
down
receiving the
halfway and with
mystical
a flushed
item.
face, In order to not reveal the secret of the tarot club, she had to wait until she had received the item before she could claim reimbursement from her father, throwing out the flaming spear. The Hanged Man wasn't the least bit worried about Miss Justice's credibility. A blazing white light soared. Both Emlyn and Furs felt agitated at the same time. The remaining half of his body was also a sigh of relief, continuously releasing that more than 3,000 pounds of his would be available soon. Seeing that his attack had succeeded, he silently drew a crimson moon inwardly when he suddenly sensed a particular kind of crazy, terrifying hunger. At this moment, he felt as though he had arrived in front of a deep abyss, just one step short from falling in. Although Alger had predicted that Miss Justice was no longer suppressing the crazy soul inside him was indeed worth about 5,500 substitutes 3 times, he still felt a strong sense of discomfort over such a predetermined distance. It felt like after all the hard work he had put in to make a killing, the money he earned wasn't even more than her pocket money. And dark golden scales £675 split from the world, and the artist's faded away is only £600 as if they had turned vertical. I'll earn a net profit of £400. His pupils reflected Bishop Millet's fluttering dark blue £5 in this transaction. Without a sound, but the world isn't a simple figure. About to produce a large number of great deal of beyonder characteristics and potion formulas, and he's involved in a great number of events. His eyes, which were glowing with a dark red light, relatively important lost their rationality as they were filled with a sense of madness. It's not worth it to get into a conflict with him over a few £100 and colorful. Otherwise, like the skin of some aquatic pushed the price of his beyonder characteristic to below £4,000, as though it had come from the depths of the ocean. Thought wistfully, a slippery, disgusting tentacle rejoiced at the prospect of receiving £3,825. Psychiatrist's frenzy. Looked at the lady across him and originally said, only wanted to use this to interrupt the enemy's stomach in order to create an opportunity for him later. Excellent. But after going berserk, Bishop Millet immediately lost control. £300 in cash the moment to Mr. the fallen or corrupted man lost his final shackles of reasoning, Alger's spirit was also lifted. Stepped into the abyss of losing control. He hurriedly requested the fool sitting at the end of the long bronze table for permission to conjure the potion formula. He no longer hesitated. A few seconds later, he wrote the Solar High Priest in the midst of his frenzy onto the yellowish-brown glove on his left palm became stained with a gold color. Sequence 7. His expression became dignified as his gaze once again locked onto Bishop Millet. 1 comb of a dawn rooster. In an instant, 1 fruit of a radiant spirit like 2 bolts of lightning. Supplementary ingredients. All of a sudden, 100 milliliters of a blood-curdling screech, 10 drops of sun essential oil, and tentacles retracted as he covered his citron powder. His psyche had been penetrated, solidified lava, causing him indescribable pain. Didn't deliberately pry into this potion formula. Klein pushed himself up with his right hand, thanks to him was still and reflected in his mind, lit up with a resplendent brilliance. As long as he was willing to use dream divination to recall, he leaned back and opened his arms as if to embrace the sun. He couldn't help but exclaim, and blazing brilliance descended from the sky, is most profitable. Landing on Bishop Millet and enveloping him with parchment expectantly. The surroundings changed as though it was relief and excitement. The strong gales came to an abrupt halt. He conjured the list of monsters which were found in the area surrounding the City of Silver. Bishop Millet's body began to evaporate. Pick out the beyonder ingredients that would be used to level the difference in prices. Finally, his flesh. Alger calmly and carefully checked the list, pillar of light disappeared, gaining a precise understanding of the situation around the City of Silver. After that, turned into a monster made of bones and flesh that he knew had buyers and prices. Of his aura was rather weak. I'll be able to sell them within 2 days. Earning me about £1,000 was stronger than ever before. Klein's expression didn't change. Counting the £300 from Miss Magician and the previous £1,075 to the battered body of Bishop Millet. I'll finally have enough money for the dragon-eyed sea condor's eyeballs, and pressed his left palm against the flesh. Alger turned his head to the side. He stopped using the power of the Priest of Light because he wanted to leave some food for creeping hunger. A small crack silently appeared in the palm region of the glove as 2 rows of illusory, white, and even the eerie teeth grew out from it as it madly devoured any flesh, bones, and spirituality. However, by the end of the transaction, Bishop Millet continued struggling. He steadied his flesh and grew new tentacles, sufficient enough to cover the tangled Klein and required to his ingredient. Klein threw his cane, pulled out his revolver, and fired 5 shots in quick succession at the monster. Bang! All right. Bang! For her, how much this deal would eventually earn her would depend on pale gold, Dorian gray, and silver colors. She wouldn't earn anything extra beyond what he was willing to share with her. Flames. At the end of the transaction segment, Klein manipulated the world to seek to purchase the remnant spirituality of ancient race wasn't able to resist from a creeping gargoyle. Even his flesh and soul were transformed into a torrent that poured into the insatiable mouth. He temporarily didn't intend to do it through the tarot. All that was left on the ground he wished to use it as a catalyst to expand his social connections and resource channels at sea. This was the difference between today's tarot gathering and grazing. Miss Justice will finish gathering her psychiatrist potions ingredients, but there was no other food around. And the same is true for Miss Magician's Trickmaster potion. Captain Elend had already created 2 rounds of holy water inside his alcohol flask. Towards sequence 7. He's one step closer to providing me with a way to remove the mental corruption conversation inside a beyond a characteristic. Threw the alcohol flask towards the headless men who were still vying for the main ingredients of wind blast.
Ahem.
So there's only one last obstacle in his way before reaching sequence 6. He leisurely inserted his left palm into his pocket made up his mind forward with his right solution, quickly forming many scarlet fire ravens around him. These half-illusionary fire ravens flapped their wings and flew out, following different trajectories was about to say something out of habit. At the same time, but when she thought about it carefully, she felt that there was no right on top of the group of headless people. Apart from the numerous balls I've attended and the 2 psychology classes, as sun-holy there are only matters regarding my return to Eastchester County that can be talked about. The remaining headless people were all drenched as they screamed and twitched in pain before falling to the ground. Furs, they melted away in her languid blood as the New Year's holidays, lay still in the middle of having a blank mind. It's resolved, feeling rather guilty. Sparrow is really strong. Is still under the same kind of high pressure as before. He'll have the ability to resist unless you're an official Beyonder. It's a pity that I didn't get to see what Beyonder powers he had used. Who had been behaving well during this time, frowned who was standing in front of the remains of vampire like him who led a routine lifestyle couldn't experience the pain of having all the Beyonder gatherings stopped. The hanged man nodded and thought for a while. Dejectedly ran out and picked up Isaac's copper whistle. Donna rubbed her bruised arm and saw Uncle Sparrow isn't as simple as it seems. Back a few steps Audrey immediately looked at Mr. Fool, who was sitting upright on his high-back chair. Noticing looks of puzzlement, curiosity, or excitement, the end of things leisurely with a hint of reminiscence in his voice. Bishop Millet's Beyonder characteristic had already been fully condensed. A king of angels. It was only the size of a thumb and was translucent and light blue in color. However, from time to time, green streaks would appear like a tidal wave that approached a black hue. A king of angels. Opening the revolver cylinder, took a deep breath, shook it, her expression the empty shells that were either gold, why is it that silver, all we talk about or brass in color to the descent of the true creator, creating crisp tinkling the awakening sounds of the primordial demoness, he calmly took out a speed loader he had prepared earlier and loaded other Beyonder rounds bullet into the gun. She wanted to look up at the sky and sigh. He put away the revolver, on the other hand, bent over to pick up Bishop Millet's Beyonder characteristic, having found it into his pocket without paying too much attention to it. Klein picked up his cane and turned back to the group after taking a few steps. In preparation for the apocalypse. He pulled out a paper figurine and flicked it like he was lashing a whip. Evil existences such as the king of angels, figurine was quickly ignited. It flew out of his hand and turned into specks of scarlet light. Emlyn had an impulse to immediately agree to the deal proposed by the hanged man. How cool! But the fact that he had no money Denton forgot the pain from his fantasy and stared intently. Which king of angels will it be? Setting off fireworks. In a rare occasion, Donna joined in with the conversation with Miss Justice and the rest. After using paper figurine substitutes to interfere with the information and traces in the area, hiding? Klein looked in the direction of the way back and said calmly and concisely, seeing that Mr. Fool didn't plan on continuing, he turned around and walked away at a leisurely pace. Mr. Fool, he took the sun brooch and Isaac's copper whistle from Ellen and Janet's respectively, and said, Erdy and the others didn't make useless comments, redemption, nor did they cry out in pain. Live in Binzie. They followed quietly behind. Redemption. In the battle just now, angels related to the true creator, the uniqueness of Beyonders. Audrey didn't expect that the matter would be multi-layered powers, with each layer more eye-catching and obvious. She subconsciously left them a deep impression, Binzie, making them fully realize that this wasn't something ordinary. People could intervene in a low voice as he clenched his hands. All they could do was abide by the instructions and follow closely behind this matter. He only knew that the unforeseen event in Bansi Harbor might not be over yet. The battle between Klein and Bishop Millet mainly involved invisible wind blades and the truly intangible psyche domain. Other than the holy light something to do with the temple of the true creator and the angel of Millet's loss of control. The entire battle to confirm exactly what it represented, so it didn't deliver a shock to the onlookers. The level of this matter is beyond my imagination. Alger looked at the end of the long mottled table, and the others suddenly stopped in their tracks. The thought flashed through his mind that Mr. Fool really did know the 8 kings of angels and that he knew many secrets. They instantly understood one thing. He thought of something. And that was that Gehrman Sparrow's battle with the fallen bishop was many times more harrowing about the other kings of angels. A sense of horror and security arose at the same time as all of them quickened their pace. Chapter 5:16. The Hanged Man's Guess amidst his shock. Another doubt surfaced in Alger's mind. If Mr. Fool had foreseen this, why did he mention that Bansi Harbor's matter is related to Rose Redemption and the King of Angels, Medici? Did he tell us on purpose? He hopes to spread this matter through us? The target is the King of Angels, Medici? No, it's more likely to be the true creator. Mr. Fool has repeatedly thwarted the plans of the true creator before, so it should be no exception this time. The term Rose Redemption appeared in the abandoned temple of the true creator, and it's established by the King of Angels, Medici, and Ouroboros. Clearly, they share a deep connection with the true creator. Bansi Harbor only has our Church of Storms, so the person Mr. Fool is really informing is actually me? Alger vaguely understood something. Then, he became acutely aware of another problem. The last time the world mentioned that something major was about to happen in Backland, it was immediately confirmed by Mr. Fool, and it later involved the awakening of the primordial demoness and the descent of the true creator. This time, the abnormality at Bansi Harbor also received a response from Mr. Fool. He revealed the secret hidden in ancient Binzi and has brought the Rose Redemption and the King of Angels to the forefront of all the members of the Tarot Club. Isn't this T2 coincidental? Yes, news provided by the world previously had to do with Backland, and this is the first time it involves the sea. Furthermore, Mr. Fool had mentioned last week that his adorer has been forced to leave Backland because of the Great Smog. They match perfectly. So, the world is actually Mr. Fool's adorer? No, he should be a representative among all his adorers in the Tarot Club. He's to do things that Mr. Fool finds inconvenient. Of course, through this gathering, the adorer will also trade goods and knowledge in order to advance himself. This is also considered a form of Mr. Fool's nurturing of him. On careful thought, this theory is probably correct. At least, the world has never collected Roselle's diary in exchange for knowledge or intelligence from Mr. Fool. As his adorer, it's his duty, so he has probably submitted them in private. From this conclusion, some deliberate questions or contradictions on the world's part are meant to conceal his identity as an adorer. This is consistent with his experienced, skilled, and cunning character. In addition to the hidden attempt to awaken as he slowly lifts the seal, Mr. Fool holds the tarot gathering to also use us to interfere in certain events. This is evident from the composition of the members: a high noble, a beyonder at the bishop level of the church, a survivor of the forsaken land of the gods, a student of the Abraham family, an adult vampire. Each of us represents a faction or a particular circle or resource channel. Many thoughts flashed through Alger's mind. Not only was he not repressed by his own guesses, but he was also excited. To him, Mr. Fool's unknown purpose was the most frightening thing. Having an initial understanding of what he wanted to do allowed him to effectively avoid any risks and improve himself by doing so. As long as the Fool wants to use us to do things, he'll definitely give us some benefits. This is exactly what I was hoping for. Otherwise, I don't know when I'll be able to see the hope of becoming a demigod. The world. You definitely didn't expect that I would see through your disguise. Alger's fear subsided, and he began to think about how to use the information about Bansi Harbor. He couldn't report the matter just like that, as it would arouse suspicion, and he had to patiently wait for an opportunity to let the higher-ups appreciate him and reward him, without ending up being monitored. Audrey could tell that Mr. Hanged Man was undergoing a mental exercise, but she didn't expect him to come up with so many guesses in such a short period of time. And from the words of Mr. Fool, she was delighted to learn that Rose Redemption was a secret organization established by a number of kings of angels, which was also related to the true creator. At the same time, she vaguely sensed the strangeness of the world. She realized that this member of the organization, who was the most difficult to read, was always involved in important matters and could always obtain important information. Furthermore, he constantly produced formulas, ingredients, and beyonder characteristics, as if he could successfully hunt down a beyonder within 1 to 2 weeks. He left Backland and went to sea? Or was it a rumor he heard in Backland? Should I tell this information to the church? Well, Mr. Hanged Man has a close relationship with the Church of Storms, so it's better for him to do it, and there wouldn't be any problems. Audrey suppressed the thought of probing and only curiously asked, "Honorable Mr. Fool, what's the title of the King of Angels, Medici? Or should I say, what is his pathway?" Klein leaned back into his chair and said with a deep chuckle, "Red Priest." Red Priest? Which pathway is that? It sounds very similar to the Dark Emperor. Could it be that it's another Sequence 0 title? Audrey thought with excitement and joy. Red Priest. Derek silently muttered the words, realizing that there was no corresponding record in the City of Silver's history. Perhaps I haven't read enough, having only received a general education. He thought regretfully. Furs and Emlyn listened as if they were listening to a story, and were equally interested in similar information. The only problem is that I can't brag about it or write it into my novels. Furs felt a pang of regret. Mr. Hanged Man will likely report it to his superiors. Let's hope he doesn't delay it for too long. With his shrewdness, he may have already figured out some of the problems regarding the world and has grasped the relationship between him and the Fool. Fortunately, I've deliberately set up the world to be Sherlock Moriarty since a long time ago, giving him the identity of an adorer. Mr. Hanged Man can at best detect it up to this point, unable to imagine that the world is actually a dummy. Klein raised his hand to his chin, smiled and said, "Continue." Seeing that Mr. Fool was no longer talking about the subject, Emlyn, who had freed himself from his emotions as a messiah, began to face the difficult problems of reality. That was his lack of money. Regardless, he had never considered selling off his dolls. He only told himself that he needed to be frugal in the future. Only after half a year or even a year could he get himself a new doll, or he could buy a new set of clothes for the dolls he already had. In addition, the only way he could think of making money was to sell some potions that had a miraculous effect, but that could easily bring hidden danger to his clansmen in Backlund. This is an arrangement by the ancestor. Logically speaking, Lord Nib should provide me help, but Mr. Fool wishes for me to keep it a secret, to be the messiah in the shadows who's burdened with responsibility. I'm not to reveal it on my own accord. After thinking for a few seconds, Emlyn pumped himself up, cleared his throat, and said, "Everyone, I have a question. Here's the matter. Suppose there's a powerhouse who has arranged for you to investigate something. Although you have successfully obtained the information, you are unable to report it to the person due to certain reasons. Then, how can you continue to get support from this powerhouse?" Having said this, Emlyn suddenly felt that this act was somewhat shameful. This makes me appear like a traitor and a spy. No, I'm doing this for the sake of the Sanguine's continuation. For this, I have to give up my reputation and bear the burden of being misunderstood. When this is over, and when the truth is revealed, they'll be moved by me. Emlyn quickly eased his prior feelings. At this moment, Audrey, Furs, and Derek cast their eyes towards Alger. In their eyes, Mr. Hanged Man was the most experienced and the best teacher in this field. Klein also thought so too. Alger glanced at the moon and chuckled. "It's simple, but you have to take some risks." Emlyn subconsciously denied. "It's not me." The Hanged Man replied with a chuckle. "Let's assume that it's you." He continued his description. "You will slowly display a certain level of abnormalities in your daily life, allowing that powerhouse to see that you have a problem. He will have two choices. One is to interrogate you directly, but it will be very easy to end up losing a lead for clues. The second is to inadvertently provide you with help so that you can investigate more thoroughly and then send people to monitor you. I think the second possibility is the most likely. The risk you have to take is how to not reveal the information you want to hide while under surveillance. That works. In fact, I won't be exposed either. Every tarot gathering, I'll be resting in the Harvest Church, looking normal on the outside. As for the sacrifice of items and the receiving of bestowments, they're things that can be shown to Lord Nibs and the others. It will allow them to guess that I have formed some sort of connection with Mr. Fool, but they can't imagine that I've already joined a secret gathering. Very well, while I'm studying history, I'll take the initiative to ask Baron Waymandy about the City of Silver." Emlyn's eyes lit up as he had an idea. He then thought of something and turned to the Hanged Man. "Last week, didn't you ask about a way to make everyone on board a ship sleep at the same time? It's very simple. I can provide you with a magical anesthetic gas that can effectively spread without any irritating smells. Even on the deck, one will fall unconscious once they catch a whiff of it. Of course, it's best if you choose a windless night, and that the targets are unable to sense danger, and their physiques cannot be too strong. Those Beyonders that are well known for their physiques in Sequence 9 are the limit. It can cause deep slumber that lasts for more than 3 hours. The effects will constantly decline after that. £100 a can, and an extra £30 for me." The Hanged Man thought about the situation of the sailors on the ghost ship and didn't haggle. Okay. He wanted to erect a certain image in front of the moon, to prepare for the big transaction that would follow. He had thought of using a slumber charm, but that would require him to chant the incantation. It would make the sailors notice that something was wrong and suspect something afterward. At the end of the exchange, Klein tapped the surface of the long mottled table with his finger, and he said with a leisurely smile, "I can foresee that everyone will present a new appearance of themselves next week. Let us end today's gathering here. Thank you for your blessings." Audrey was the first to stand up. She took her leave, expressing her gratitude. With Mr. Fool saying those words, she felt more confident in consuming the psychiatrist potion. As the magician and the others repeated the same words, one figure after another disappeared from the palace. The area above the grey fog returned to its eternal silence. Chapter 517. City of Generosity Backland. Cherwood Borough. As the crimson glow faded from her eyes, Furs saw the familiar desk and open notebook which she used to jot down her inspirations. To her, this experience was no longer anything new, but it still evoked reverence from the bottom of her heart. This was a power that didn't belong to humans, something that even demigods were incapable of. I'll receive the stomach pouch of a spirit eater in 2 days. My apprentice potion has already been digested. Finally, I'll become a trick master. I wonder what beyonder powers I'll receive. By advancing by my own abilities, teacher will definitely place greater importance on me. Apart from potion formulas in the future, perhaps I might be provided with some beyonder ingredients. How I look forward to that very much. I don't even know the corresponding names of sequence 6 and 5. I only know that sequence 7 is astrologer. After I become a trick master, I'll immediately write to teacher. Furs felt like she was one step closer to ridding herself from the curse of the full moon. At this moment, she heard the sound of hurried footsteps approaching. Finally, it turned into the slam of the door. Zio is out again. She's so busy. Furs sighed silently. If not for the £400 debt that she owes Viscount Glaint, we would probably be vacationing at Desi Bay now. After a long period of hard work, and thanks to the enhancement of her strength, certain tasks that were previously impossible for her to complete have become simple. Moreover, from time to time, Zio would receive small tasks that pay well from the Golden Masked Man. Zio has already raised her savings from £110 to £320, leaving her with only £80 left to pay off her debt. In fact, I could spot her £80, but unfortunately, although she isn't tall, she still has a lot of pride in her. Furs withdrew her thoughts and thought about the matter Mr. World had entrusted her. As a doctor and a writer, she didn't know much about radios or anything about the entire field of machinery. She didn't usually pay attention to such information when reading the newspapers, so she didn't know where she could buy the kind of transceiver the world wanted. A department store? It probably doesn't sell one. Alright, Avil writes science fiction, so he should know a lot about such matters. Furs quickly found the right person to consult. However, she immediately had a new problem. Was she to visit him directly, or was she to write him a letter of inquiry? Glancing at the chair covered in a thick, soft blanket, and smelling the fragrance of coffee and tobacco emanating the room, she felt a warmth slowly creeping through her body. Bit by bit, her motivation to leave the house crumbled. I'm not familiar with him, so I shouldn't rashly pay him a visit. She sat down with a grunt and unfolded a piece of paper. In the Berg household in the City of Silver. Derek opened his eyes and woke up from feigning sleep. According to his original plan, he would have immediately held a sacrificial ritual to send out the stomach pouch of the spirit eater. However, the words of the hanged man reminded him to be more cautious and make more observations. I'll gather the ingredients Mr. Hanged Man require first, and then I'll do the sacrificial ritual all at once. Derek remained silent for a few seconds, then he attached his axe of hurricane to his body and headed for the steeple. He first checked the items available for exchanging using merit points, but he wasn't in a hurry to complete the transaction. He planned to go to the underground market to take a look once the lightning in the sky subsided. Derek went up to the 3rd floor and headed straight for the library section that dealt with mythology and ancient classics, hungering for valuable information he hadn't learned yet. Suddenly, he saw a hard and yellowed book with a cover, Giant King's Court, Book of Blackrock, hand-copied edition. It's a record passed down from the Giant King's Court? I wonder if there's anything related to the Kings of Angels. Derek reached for the book, pulled it out, and saw that it was bound in a brown monster hide. At that moment, on the upper level of the library, Colin Iliad was wearing a flaxen-colored linen shirt and a brown coat and standing there quietly, looking down. His unkempt grizzled hair flailed in the breeze from the window, and his pale blue eyes were deep and reserved. Wednesday, January 12th, 5:40 p.m. The sky was dark and cloudy, with deep blue waves undulating across the sea. The white agate bobbed up and down in this storm, like a toy in the palm of a giant. This is the sea. No matter how powerful one is, one will appear insignificant in front of it. Danet stood by the window and enjoyed the scenery outside. Fortunately, we're almost at the City of Generosity. From the moment they left Bansi Harbor, the white agate's journey had been smooth sailing. With the help of the wind, it reached a stable speed of 15 knots. Hence, Even though they arrived at Tiana port a little later than scheduled, they completed the entire journey half a day earlier. That is to say, the white agate, which was scheduled to arrive at the City of Generosity on the morning of the 13th, arrived on the evening of the 12th. Hearing Danet's reflections, Klein just glanced up at him, then looked away and continued his contemplation. The more he played the part of Gairman Sparrow, and the more he had to force himself to behave in accordance with his persona, the more deeply he realized what kind of person he was. When faced with different situations, he realized that the choices he really wanted to make were different from Gairman Sparrow's. For example, he would have responded to Danet's by idly chatting with him about the weather at sea and the disasters caused by those terrible storms, but Gairman Sparrow wouldn't. He had to be cold and reserved. The more there are such differences, the more I recognize myself. Klein sighed inwardly. This was something he hadn't experienced when he moved about with his identity as the private detective, Sherlock Moriarty. Back then, he didn't have to disguise his personality and had just been himself. I feel like I've digested my potion a little. However, Gairman Sparrow has traits that are similar to myself. At the very least, when choosing to disembark and entering Bansi Harbor to save the others, I overlapped with this identity of mine, and there was no difference. Of course, it could also be said that I was adding a certain kind of persona into the mix. Beneath Gairman Sparrow's gentleness and madness, he has a kind, brave, and compassionate heart that values relationships. Heh, I can't boast about myself. If I had known earlier that Bansi was Binzi, I would have most likely been terrified. Not necessarily. At the very least, the danger which was divined was within an acceptable range. Klein thought, summing things up as he engaged in self-deprecation. This made him more aware of a problem. Although playing the role of a purely fictional person could help him digest the potion, he needed to replace an existing identity to speed up and improve his progress. He needed to gain the affirmation of people from the other person's interpersonal relationships, feel the corresponding emotions of joy, anger, sadness, and immersing himself in them, but not getting obsessed. Become anyone, but ultimately become yourself in the end? And get feedback from the people involved? Klein looked at the pale yellow carpet, his mind racing. Seeing Gairman Sparrow without a response, Danet spread his hands helplessly, feeling bored out of his mind. This crazy guy is good in every way other than making me do what servants do. There's only one thing, he doesn't like to talk. There's a communication barrier with him. If this goes on, I'll definitely go crazy. Fortunately, I'm finally at Byam. I can finally be free. Danetz felt that he would sooner or later develop a habit of talking to himself when faced with a similar silence. After a while he saw Gairman Sparrow look up, smile and say, "You can tell me about the pirate point of contacts in Byam." Dogs hit. "It's better if you don't say anything." Danetz's expression twisted. Whoosh. At 6:15 p.m., just before the storm arrived, the white agate docked smoothly and arrived at the capital of the Rörsted Archipelago, Byam, the City of Generosity. It was also known as the Spice Archipelago, and it was home to a variety of exotic spices, with the plantations of these produce being mainstays of the economy. The Blue Mountain Island, where Byam was located, occupied more than half of the archipelago, which was mostly covered in forest. It had gold, silver, copper, coal, iron, and other minerals, as well as a plentiful variety of fruits due to the particularly fertile land. For these reasons, the first batch of colonists named the seaside city they built the City of Generosity. They believed it was a land of treasure promised by the gods, where it flowed with milk and honey. Klein picked up his suitcase which Danetz packed, and he left room 312, entering the corridor that led to the deck. Without any surprises, he met Donna's family, Clevy's, and others. The two siblings were still a little afraid of Klein after the fright he gave them. They hid behind their parents and bodyguards and didn't dare to speak, appearing like deflated balloons. Klein nodded slightly as a form of greeting. At this moment, Erdy Branch hesitated for a second and then took a half-step forward. "Mr. Sparrow, will you be staying in Byam? If I wish to hire, no request for your help, how can I contact you?" He's indeed a businessman with a spirit of adventure. Even if he's afraid, he still wishes to befriend someone with beyonder powers. Klein thought for a moment. What newspapers are in circulation over here? The Sonia Morning Post and the News Report are popular in the archipelago, Erdy said without any thought. Put an advertisement in the Sonia Morning Post for 3 days in a row asking to buy Demir's special cured meat, and leave an address. I'll go look for you, and if I don't show up 3 days later, it means I'm at sea again. Klein was careful to give a one-way method of contact. All right. Erdi exhaled and smiled. Cleves and the others expressed their gratitude once again, and left the cabin in an orderly manner. Noticing the gangway in sight, Donna suddenly slowed her pace and stepped back next to Klein, raised her face and bit her lip. Uncle Sparrow, since that kind of power definitely brings about threats and madness, why did you choose to have it? She had thought about this question for a long time before finally mustering the courage to ask. Klein was startled, and he instinctively formed a smile. For my dream. Then he lowered his voice and said 2 words. And, protect. Protect. Donna mumbled the word in a slightly lost voice, picked up her pace, and caught up with her parents. After watching the Branch family leave the white agate, Klein retracted his gaze and said to Danitz, "You're free." For a moment, Danitz wasn't used to it. Chapter 5:18. On the brink of death without another word or care for Danitz, Klein pressed his top hat and carried his suitcase down the gangway. "Are you really going to let me go?" Blazing Danitz stood on the deck, his face filled with suspicion. Although he had expected such an outcome, with Gehrman Sparrow directly letting him go while in Demir Harbor, making him capable of imagining today's scene, he still couldn't believe it. He felt that everything that befell him came too simply and easily. "Regardless, I'm worth 3,000 pounds. No, this is the bounty offered only by loan. Isn't this madman, Gehrman Sparrow, an adventurer? How can he let go of a huge amount of wealth in front of him? It's incomprehensible. It's true that normal people can't understand the mindset of lunatics." Danitz gradually snapped back to his senses. With his luggage in hand, he carefully descended the gangway and stepped onto the concrete ground of the dock. He straightened his back, lifted his head, and gave Gehrman Sparrow's back a glance. He realized that he really wasn't turning back and was following the path straight for Coastal Street. Danitz didn't dare delay a second longer. He immediately turned around and left through another path, occasionally changing directions and using obstacles to look back, in order to ensure that he wasn't followed. Soon, he arrived at a row of houses near the warehouse at the dock. Gehrman Sparrow really didn't use me as bait. After triple-checking, Danitz finally relaxed completely. At this moment, he finally felt like he was liberated. A dignified bosun of a pirate admiral like him no longer had to be bullied and be ordered around like a servant. "I can already foresee that tomorrow will be incomparably beautiful. There will be a group of people vying to flatter me, wanting to become my servants." Danitz knocked happily on the door, 3 long and 3 short, rhythmically. Gehrman Sparrow asked me to give him the pirate point of contacts in Byam. I obviously only told him the ones that don't have a good relationship with us. There's no way he could guess that our golden dream point of contact is right at the dock. Danitz picked at his nose and breathed in the fresh sea breeze before a looming rain. Byam was a pivotal location of the Lone Kingdom's Sonia Sea colonies. It was one of the largest cities in the region. There were many powerful official beyonders, and no matter how rampant the pirates were, they didn't dare to openly show their faces here. Most of the time, they had to rely on the local gangs or people with backgrounds to handle the loot and purchase any necessities. Of course, this didn't mean that they wouldn't come to Byam. The Red Theater here was the most famous brothel in the surrounding seas, and countless pirates came to patronize this famous place. Even if 1 or 2 of their peers were caught every once in a while, it didn't stop them from rushing over. In addition to the spice trade, the brothel industry was another major pillar of the Rorstad archipelago. Apart from the Red Theater, there were many big or small brothels, out in the open or hidden all over the place. They fully satisfied the desires of the seamen with ample energy. As for the female pirates, they didn't have to worry about this problem. As long as they were willing, they could always be satisfied. After all, there was more demand than supply. At sea, where faith in the Lord of Storms was mainstream, there had always been few females. Similarly, the underground trade related to beyonder ingredients and mysticism was quite frequent here, and there were many circles. Those smaller ports are still better. We don't have to be afraid of being discovered at all, and we can just openly sit in a bar, engage in disputes with adventurers, and even fight them. As long as we don't cause any trouble or cause any deaths, the local official beyonders will turn a blind eye. With their strength, they typically have to take on tremendous risks if they wish to interfere. Danitz thought mockingly. At that moment, he heard footsteps and saw the door creak open. A familiar face entered his sight.
"Old man, did you not drink today?"
Danitz smiled and greeted. Standing at the door was one of the Golden Dreams contacts in the Rörsted archipelago, Old Rin. Old Rin coughed twice and made way.
Danitz stepped into the dim room, his nose twitching suddenly.
He caught a whiff of Lanti-proof. No, Old Rin likes to drink locally produced Biome Black Rand. As this thought flashed through his mind, Danitz was terrified.
Immediately following that, he saw a man with his back to him rise to his feet.
He was tall, dark, and muscular, and his hair was curled like marbles. Steel Mavati. Danitz's pupils contracted sharply.
This was the second mate of the Admiral of Blood, a great pirate with a bounty of 6,000 pounds. Waves of the sea breeze blew, swaying the thin, sharp leaves of the tree in a precarious manner.
Klein was walking along Coastal Street at an adequate speed. In contrast, the people around him were hurrying and walking quickly. His spiritual intuition told him that it would take some time before the storm would arrive, and that he had plenty of time to find a hotel. Whoosh! The sound of the wind grew louder and louder. Tree branches fell to the ground, and there weren't many people left on the street.
Klein was about to turn into another alley when he heard the sound of hasty but disorderly running.
Tap, tap, tap. Danitz was running with all his might, but the scene in front of him began to rock. He felt an abnormal pain from his wound as he felt his vitality rapidly sapping away. His spirit body had partially left his body, approaching the legendary underworld.
As for the surrounding sounds, he could only vaguely hear them, and everything in his line of sight looked like it wasn't real.
If it wasn't for having Shadow Cloak, the ambush would have killed him. But even so, he was still severely injured and could die on the streets at any moment.
He was forced to run towards Coastal Street because of his will to warn the captain that their point of contact had been compromised by the Admiral of Blood, as well as the glimmer of hope brought by that crazy but powerful figure.
If it's him, then he would definitely be able to escape from the hands of Steel Mavati's henchmen. Danitz began to stagger, and his body gradually grew cold. Just as he was about to collapse, he saw Gehrman Sparrow standing by a street corner. His refined face that hid madness appeared so genial at that moment. Plop! Danitz fell on his back, his hands hanging limply over his chest, revealing a hideous exaggerated wound that was inflicted to his organs. Tell Captain that Old Rin has been discovered. Steel Mavati did it for that treasure. Danitz saw Gehrman Sparrow kneel to his side as he hurriedly spoke.
Klein recalled the bounty offered for Steel Mavati and asked in return, "Admiral of Blood?"
"Yes, Tell Captain." "Tell Captain." Danitz gasped as he said.
After saying all that, he revealed a mournful smile.
"Don't worry about me. I'm about to die soon. Tell the captain that all the money I've saved up has been turned into real estate. Units 12 to 16 on Biome Zamiris Avenue. The title deeds are hidden in the wall of Unit 13's basement. Help me sell them. Take the money to South Intis's Elima town. Give the money to my parents."
"Say that I've really made a fortune." Danitz paused, then he said with great difficulty, "Say that I've become an outstanding adventurer.
Also,
help me say I'm sorry." His eyes suddenly became moist, as if he was recalling that rebellious youth from back then.
"I'm sorry, old man. Mother. I'm unable to return home." Danitz's vision darkened, and he felt that his life was coming to an end.
It was at this moment that he saw Gehrman Sparrow reach out and press his hand to his wound and then swipe it. Danitz's sorrow came to a sudden halt as he felt the already numb pain in his chest and abdomen suddenly disappear as his left hand seemed to suffer a fracture.
He looked at Klein blankly, and Klein looked back at him quietly. None of them spoke for 2 seconds.
Finally, he looked down in astonishment and discovered that his lethal wound had strangely healed.
His left arm was badly mutilated, and even his bones protruded out.
"I am fine now?"
Danitz blinked, still immersed in the sadness and frustration of his brush with death. "Why didn't you treat me first?" he asked blankly.
Klein looked back at the empty area on the other side of Coastal Street and said in a calm tone, "Waiting for you to finish."
"That's basic courtesy. Courtesy, you son of a bitch. I was really saying my last words." With a sudden jerk of his back, Danitz rolled to his feet.
He warily looked towards the dock, where a thick cloud of smoke was rising. It was none other than the result of the battle he had just been engaged in. Because the house was set on fire by me, Steel Mavati was afraid that it would catch the attention of the official Beyonders. As he was confused by that shadow, he didn't chase after me. Danitz instantly understood the sequence of events. Let's find a place to stay first. Klein spread his hands and caught a drop of rain. Not knowing whether or not he had completely escaped danger, Danitz immediately nodded. Okay. I can tell that this madman, German Sparrow, isn't afraid of Steel Mavati at all. He's not even afraid of Admiral of Blood. At such times, I especially admire his craziness. Damn, I exposed my wealth to him. Danitz had just exhaled when his body froze. Klein walked silently ahead with his suitcase and cane with only one thought echoing in his head. Godmit, a pirate is richer than I am. Empress Burrow. Audrey, who was about to leave Backlund, hid in her chemistry laboratory and concocted the psychiatrist potion with the ingredients she received from Mr. Vampire, the fruit of the Tree of Elders, the blood of a mirror dragon, and the other ingredients she had collected previously. This time, she didn't get Susie to guard the door. Instead, she was to sit inside and observe the whole process from the sidelines. Earl Hall had already instructed everyone to not approach the young lady during her experiments, but they had to pay attention to any unusual changes. Phew! Audrey let out a small sigh of relief, pouring the completed potion into a prepared glass bottle. The slightly golden liquid rippled like a deformed, gigantic pupil. Its gaze seemed to shine right into the eyes of anyone's heart. Susie, did you remember the process? You are a mature Beyonder. In the future, you'll have to learn how to concoct your own potion. No, it's not that I'm not helping you. It's just that I'm pointing out a possibility. Sometimes, I might not be by your side, and you just happen to need a potion bottle, Audrey said happily to the huge golden retriever. Susie was so confused by what she was taught, and she could only open her mouth to reply with a single word, woof. Converging her emotions, Audrey raised her head and downed the psychiatrist potion bottle. Chapter 519. Naming the golden liquid was cool and refreshing, making Audrey feel as if she was enjoying a delicious ice cream. She then took a sip of champagne. Tiny bubbles of air continuously rose, silently bursting as they brought a tingling sensation with them. Suddenly, her sense of hearing reached out, and she could hear the conversation of the two maids at the end of the corridor as they lamented at how they had no chance of going to the Hall family's castle and manor in Eastchester County. At this moment, Audrey felt as if she had dissolved into an illusory gas and was rapidly expanding. It filled the entire room, overlapping with a sea formed from everyone's sea of consciousness. Her vision also changed. Everything she saw was abnormally smooth, turning into a mirror that reflected her current appearance. Possessing a beauty described by pure, exquisite, grand, and witty, golden scales that were slowly growing out of her exposed skin. Her emerald green irises contracted and were dyed in a faint golden color, as if they had turned vertical. Audrey suddenly felt fear from the bottom of her heart when she saw herself like this. She didn't want or wish to become an inhuman monster. With a hum, her mind began to turn into a blur, as if something was slowly and painfully drilling out from the surface of her body. Just then, she heard the gentle voice of her huge golden retriever, Susie. Don't be afraid, calm down. Don't be afraid, calm down. Audrey recovered her thoughts and tried to get herself into a spectator state. Her undulating emotions quickly calmed down, and her spirit seemed to leave her body. She then looked down at herself like a spectator. Audrey saw the golden scales on the surface of her body visibly recede and her emerald-like eyes return to normal. It didn't take her long to regain control of her body and understand what Beyonder powers were available to a psychiatrist and how they were used. It was so dangerous just now. Audrey raised her hand in fear. Her skin was fair and delicate, completely unlike the abnormal condition she had been in a moment ago. After this incident, she truly understood how terrifying the danger of losing control which Mr. Fool would occasionally bring up was. She gained a deep understanding of how difficult it was to go down the Beyonder path. Even with the acting method, it was impossible to completely remove the latent risks. At one gathering, Mr. World said that Beyonders are a bunch of miserable wretches that are constantly fighting against threats and madness. Previously, I could only understand it literally. Now, I can finally feel the weight behind this sentence. Audrey, don't be discouraged, don't be afraid. Father, mother, and brother are still waiting for your protection. With this experience, you won't be frightened by yourself in the future or so easily lose control. You can do it.
Audrey clenched her fists and encouraged herself. She calmed down for 2 seconds, walked up to Susie, squatted down, and hugged the golden retriever. As she combed its fur, she put her head against the side of the dog's face and muttered in its warmth, "Thank you, thank you." Susie rubbed against her twice and asked seriously, "Audrey, is this how a psychiatrist feels like?" "I like it very much." Audrey was suddenly at a loss on whether to laugh or cry. She immediately pursed her lips and promised, "Susie, we'll treat each other in the future." "Yes, psychological problems." "Okay, woof." Susie answered happily. It was only now, with Audrey truly recovering, that she was in the mood to examine her own advancement. "My body seems to have become healthier. Although I don't have any obvious muscles, my strength and speed have become much stronger than before. My eyesight has also improved. I can even clearly see items hidden in the dark. My sense of smell is able to distinguish even more subtle smells, and thus being able to grasp a target's truest emotions and thoughts. I finally have beyonder powers in the truest sense of the word. Yes, there's also awe. I can target a single person or apply it to a group of people within a certain range. They'll instantly panic and turn chaotic as though they're facing a dragon. Another is frenzy. It will trigger the emotions and mental state of a target, throwing the target into a frenzy. They'll suffer intense psychological damage and might even cause direct loss of control at times. Another is psychological cue. Through specific methods, words, and a medium, I can cue a target, letting them abide by my arrangements without them realizing it. Or they might strongly abide by a particular promise from the bottom of their hearts. Another is placate, also known as psychoanalysis. I can help beyonders on the brink of losing control to regain their reason and escape danger. There's a certain chance of failure. The higher my sequence, the more easily it will succeed. It can calm down various psychological instabilities and allow for communication. Another is telepathy. Through mediums like candlelight and extracts, it will put the target in a partially hypnotic state. I'll then be able to directly communicate with their body of heart and mind, just like what Hilbert Alucard did to me. If not for the protection provided by Mr. Fool's Angel, then I wouldn't have the means to lie under such situations. Yes, I have to be on guard against such techniques. I can't be fooled by a target, and there should be quite a number of means to achieve this effect. With placate and telepathy, together with certain psychology knowledge, I'll be able to act as a true psychiatrist, the kind that can open a clinic. Audrey's mood rapidly improved. She finally had the feeling that she had matured and become a qualified beyonder. I'm a mid-sequence beyonder. There really is a qualitative change. She stood up, lifted her skirt, and walked briskly around in a circle. She quickly discovered that she was still lacking in direct offensive abilities as a psychiatrist. Fortunately, I have this. Audrey stopped in front of the experiment table and opened a plain brown box. Inside the box was a silver mask that could only cover half a face. It was the mystical item that the hanged man had sold her. Audrey picked it up, placed it in her palm, and observed it for a few seconds. Then, she extended her spirituality and projected her thoughts just like how she did above the gray fog. She saw the silver mask begin to warp inwards, turning into a hollow, finely patterned, slightly large earring. "It might be better to turn it into a necklace," Audrey whispered. Afterward, she tried out the various abilities of this magical item. She was most satisfied with her ability to fine-tune her appearance. It's a pity that other than flame controlling, it doesn't have any other more direct offensive powers. Perhaps I'll need to prepare a revolver, one that has beyonder effects. Audrey thought with some regret. She quickly collected her emotions and said to the mystical item in her hand with an uplifted tone towards the end, "From today, your name is Lie. The most beautiful lie. City of Generosity. Biome. 48 Acid Lemon Street. Wind of Azure Inn." It was raining heavily outside and the wind was raging, but inside the luxurious suite, the fireplace was warm and the environment peaceful. Klein sat in his chair and watched silently as Blazing Danitz dealt with the severe fracture on his left arm. He waited until Danitz was finished binding up his arm with shredded, old clothes before asking bluntly, "What treasure?" According to Danitz, it was because of some treasure that Admiral of Blood Seigneur wanted to deal with Vice Admiral Edwina Edwards. The sound of wind and rain came through the window. Danitz took a sip of the Lanty-proof on the table and then gave a bitter, angry laugh. "Those assholes who had their brains eaten by zombies. On our last expedition, we found a sunken ship. Although we didn't find anything of great value, we discovered a gigantic black iron key that doesn't look like the kind used by humans. Can you imagine? After being submerged under the sea for so many years, it hasn't rusted at all.
Yes,
Klein replied in a concise manner. In a world where extraordinariness and mystery intertwined, what wasn't possible? There were people who could be resurrected from the dead, not to mention others. Danitz choked and paused for 7 or 8 seconds before he knew what to say next. Perhaps there's a traitor among us, and the news has spread. Countless pirates believe that this is Death's key, a key that can open the treasure trove Death left behind. I thought that this problem would be cleared up very quickly and happily applied for a vacation. In the end, the matter became more complicated. Even Admiral of Blood has joined the ranks of these mad pirates. I'm even beginning to suspect that it's Death's key, a key that can turn one into a true god.
Foolish.
Klein calmly gave his evaluation.
Whether it was in the divination domain or dealing with deities, he could be considered experienced.
Thus, he had his own understanding and confidence in the interpretation of Death's key. He believed that the key was a form of revelation, a symbol. The thing that opened Death's treasure trove was probably not in the shape of a key, but some kind of characteristic, bloodline, or even certain, specified people and their descendants.
Danitz was startled for 2 seconds, and then he exclaimed, "Your words are exactly the same as Captain's previous comments, and even your expressions are very similar."
She suspects that the key belongs to an older era, an era not of humans. Before the cataclysm, this world was still full of giants, dragons, elves, and demonic wolves. The shape of the key indirectly points to one of them. Demonic wolves. Klein suddenly recalled the ravings he often heard during his past advancements. In it, the Phlegria, he heard referred to the ancient god, Annihilation demonic wolf.
A treasure that involves the second epoch? He held back his curiosity and switched to calmly saying, "Write down everything that Admiral of Blood has done, including Steel Mavati and his men."
He remembered that Admiral of Blood and his pirate crew were the most notorious groups on the ocean. Their hands were stained with blood as they committed heinous sins. How can I remember? They aren't beauties like Captain. Danitz threw up his hands. I can only list the most important things and some of the details that have left an impression on me. Wait, what do you want to do? Bit by bit, Klein revealed a smile, one that gave Danitz a fright. He said in a deep voice, "If it's appropriate, I want to hunt them."
Chapter 520. Admiral of Blood, hunt them?
Danitz asked subconsciously. When he truly understood the meaning behind Gehrman Sparrow's words, he instantly became excited. He changed his seating posture and suppressed his voice. Is there anything I can help you with? As a qualified part-time pirate, he had nothing to do with beautiful words such as tolerance, compassion, and love. Since he had nearly died at the hands of Steel Mavati and now had the chance to take revenge, he definitely wouldn't miss it. He believed that he could survive in the pirate industry by relying on an accurate grasp of the situation. Knowing when to resist, when to fight for his life, when to feign ignorance when seeing his enemies, and when to settle old scores. And now, this was an opportunity. Danitz still couldn't make an accurate judgment on how powerful Gehrman Sparrow was, but judging from how he had taken care of the fallen Bishop Millet within 10 seconds, it was unlikely that it would be too difficult for him to deal with Steel Mavati. Even if he encountered the Admiral of Blood, Senor, it wasn't impossible for him to win. Of course, this is in a one-on-one situation, and pirates never talk about chivalry. Danitz thought to himself. Klein leaned forward a little, placed his elbows on his knees, and clasped his hands. I've told you. What? Danitz felt that he was often unable to keep up with Gehrman Sparrow's train of thought. With regards to this, he could only console himself that a normal person and a madman were different. Seeing that the other party had stopped talking, he thought for a while and finally remembered what he had to do. Write down everything that Admiral of Blood and his pirate crew had done. Gehrman Sparrow definitely wants to know how many things they've plundered. Danitz quickly gathered his thoughts, rummaged around the room for a pen and paper, and scribbled a chunk of text. During this process, he was exceptionally glad that it was his left arm that was injured. When he was done writing, Klein reached out for it, read it carefully, and confirmed from the undetailed parts of Danitz's description that Admiral of Blood was the most typical and vile of pirates. Not only did they plunder, but they also abducted people, slaughtered crew members, and abused women. A pirate like Danitz actually knows how to write ancient Fasak. He's also been educated. After muttering to himself, Klein took out a copper penny and used divination to confirm the authenticity of the material. Then he said in a tone as though he was giving instructions on what was to be eaten tomorrow morning, "Tell me about the Admiral of Blood and his men."
He needs more detailed information. Is he preparing to hunt them?
Danitz was delighted, hating himself for not knowing enough. Admiral of Blood Senor is suspected to be an evil spirit. Anyone who has encountered him has died a bizarre death. Either they strangle themselves to death, blow their mouths up, hug bombs, or slaughter their companions. Captain said that it's the possession of an evil spirit. It's very similar to Miss Sharon's Beyonder powers.
Wraith.
Klein didn't speak as he listened to Danitz go on, in silence.
Senor can make a terrible shriek.
The last time I fought them, I was nearly knocked unconscious and fell off the deck and into the sea. Heh. I returned the favor and set one of their boats on fire. Senor knows a lot of undead magic. Cruel, bloodthirsty, and full of desire. His targets can be either male or female, and even humanoid creatures. Consistent with the unrestrained nature of the Rose School of Thought. Yes, accurately speaking, it's a trait of the prisoner pathway. The highest probability is that he's a wraith.
Klein nodded thoughtfully.
In response, Danitz became more active and spoke a little faster. Our captain thinks that Senor has a very powerful mystical item on him, one that makes him very lucky. He always seems to gain the favor of the gods. For example, at a critical moment, his opponent would suddenly slip or have their powers fail. Another example is winning 21 bets in a row.
A mystical item that can make someone lucky? This is very rare. It's from the monster pathway? Or is it connected to some other evil spirit?
Klein guessed based on his own knowledge of mysticism. I've never directly fought Senor, so that's all I know. Danitz wanted to throw his hands up, but he was stopped by the pain in his left arm. He has about 7 or 8 ships.
His flagship is the Tree of Flesh and Blood.
Haha, that's different from us. We mainly seek out treasure and wouldn't take in anyone. Therefore, we only have the Golden Dream. It's no wonder the Admiral of Blood's bounty is much higher than Vice Admiral Iceberg, reaching 42,000 pounds. In terms of strength, he should be a bit stronger. Klein immediately gained an understanding. He maintained the same posture as before, seemingly unaffected by the intelligence regarding the Admiral of Blood.
What about his subordinates?
Danitz was long prepared as he immediately said, Senor has 10 of his strongest men under his command, the first, second, third mates of the flagship, and the captain of each ship.
Steel Mavedi is the second mate of the flagship. We think that he's a sequence 6.
His body is like steel and is able to withstand bullets and cannonballs. He isn't afraid of fire, drowning, and various magic.
He's strong and fast.
He can rip his opponent apart, and he grasps a certain level of undead-related spells.
He can summon zombies and rear puppets. Zombie?
Klein immediately thought of Marek, who played cards with zombies. Based on the wraith traits of Admiral of Blood Senor, can it be assumed that these pirates are actually part of the outer circle of the Rose School of Thought, or perhaps they're from an organization used to make money? It's a pity that I don't have a messenger, nor did I ask Miss Sharon if she had one. Otherwise, I could contact her and confirm the Admiral of Blood's identity.
Klein guessed with some regret.
He didn't give up just because this matter might involve the Rose School of Thought. In any case, he could change his face and identity afterwards. In addition, he had involved himself with the Aurora Order, the Demoness Sect, Rose Redemption, and Twilight Hermit Order, so he wasn't afraid of offending another entity. Actually, it's not like I've never fought against the Rose School of Thought. I've already killed a wraith, a zombie, and a wraith, and I've robbed the Scarlet Lunar Corona and biological poison bottle. Klein suddenly realized how much trouble he had been involved in. It's unlikely that Mavedi has any particularly powerful mystical items. Otherwise, I might not have been able to escape before, Danitz said, feeling somewhat relieved at his luck. He has a bunch of puppets and zombies by his side, as well as several subordinates at sequence 7 or 8. As the second mate of the flagship, he should be the leader of the crew in the vicinity since he's here. We can consider hunting him first. Below the high sequences, once the number of Beyonders reaches a certain amount, a qualitative change will occur. With the combination of different abilities, it's possible for a group to defeat a Beyonder stronger than themselves. It's just like how a Nighthawks team can definitely take down a Sequence 6, or even a Sequence 5. Klein didn't underestimate Steel Mavady and his men just because he was stronger with creeping hunger. He was still as cautious as before. I have to plan and prepare well. Well, the frequency bands and passcodes I received from White Shark will come in handy, and once Miss Magician's radio transceiver is delivered, I'll get Danitz to frequently monitor the frequency and see if we can glean any information, allowing me to go in quickly to reap the harvest. And I can take advantage of this period to explore the possibility of true acting.
Soon, Klein formulated a plan as he continued to listen to Danitz tell him about the rest of Admiral of Blood's subordinates.
After a while, when Danitz was finally done, he summarized enthusiastically, "If Steel Mavady can be killed, leaving my name behind, this matter will definitely go on the papers. Once it's spread, I no longer need to worry about informing Captain."
He was afraid that a traitor was among their ranks and that all the points of contact in the Rorstad archipelago were under the enemy's control. Therefore, he didn't dare to rashly make contact.
He was still vexed over the problem of alerting his captain. He actually has a brain. Klein nodded and said, "You're in charge of gathering information on all aspects of steel." "All right," Danitz replied with a grim smile, thinking of the punch that had nearly pierced his heart in the evening. Klein slowly stood up and walked towards the window. It was dark outside with howling winds and pouring rain. It looked as if the end of the world had arrived. Thinking of what he was going to do next, he couldn't help but feel like he was acting in a certain sense.
Smiling, he muttered to himself in a low voice, "Tonight, Gehrman joins the hunt."
City of Generosity, Byam, in the Cathedral of Waves. Alger Wilson, who had received the Sanguine's anesthetic gas, was about to sail out to sea for another of the Windblest's main ingredients, when he was summoned by the local diocese bishop. There have been rumors recently that Vice Admiral Iceberg received Death's Key. "All the pirates in the Sonia Sea are roused by this," the bishop said in a heavy voice. "Investigate this matter." He was an old man with a head full of white hair, but he was still as energetic as ever. His speech was even faster than a young man's, as though he could charge out at any moment and personally resolve all problems. His body was strong, his muscles bulging with his bishop's robe. The wind howled around him as he breathed, and the air was moist. There are similar rumors every year, but they all end up being fake. Such rumors are commonly spread across the sea. Even if it's true, I don't have the right to be involved. There's no need to take the risk. I'll just go through the motions and skirt the edge of this matter." Alger muttered inwardly. He solemnly clenched his fist and struck his left breast. "Yes, Your Excellency. May the storm be with you." Diocese Bishop Chogo was very pleased with Alger's attitude and returned the same salute. "May the storm be with you." The encouraged Alger Wilson quickly left the cathedral and returned to the square outside. The storm last night had subsided, and only the scattered leaves and water puddles on the ground remained as evidence of its coming. After taking a breath of after-rain fresh air, Alger decided to visit the few places where pirates roamed. He planned to put on a show of working hard by trying to seek out information. If he were to meet a fellow with a bounty of a few £100s, he wouldn't mind apprehending the poor bastard. In his opinion, they were liquid cash flow that could be added to his savings. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.